dependent on environmental conditions for genetic, what do they call that? Genetic expression with different parts of the genome. Since our environment and our food source and our lifestyle has changed so significantly, I mean, we are seeing some major fallout reciprocations of basically dormant DNA in most of the population for most first world countries. And the irony of this is first world countries, we live nice lives and enjoy them without having to work day and night and stress ourselves off. Well, some of us anyways, I mean, but the whole thing is, if you take a look in like second to third world countries, some of them have discovered how to have incredibly long lifespans into the 120, 130 year range and live happier lives with generally better neurochemical balances. And they're basically growing all their own food, and they have nothing that we would consider comfort.
Well,
but they seem to enjoy it, and they live long. So what are we doing wrong in the West and in these first world organized civilizations?
Well, I think we're all doing something wrong personally, even in the third world countries. I think that personally our genetics has been turned down, if that's the right term, I'm not sure, but through fractal means and through, I mean, you could go as far back as the pyramids. I believe they were a working machine and had multiple different purposes. And one of those purposes was to extend our lives. But that wasn't the all of it, though. I believe that the pyramids created a torsion field, like time mechanics in a sense, but more like imparting energy, bringing it down from the stratosphere, grounding it so that we can access it. And it's right there for everyone to absorb. But in order to absorb it at a high rate so that it stayed within the body, we needed a key factor, something that they used to call mifkit or mana or the philosopher's stone, hence what BurnEye's working on, monatomic elements. And I believe that monatomic elements are high spin rate material that we need for our body to absorb that kind of energy to extend our life. If you go back into the Bible, and I've been doing a lot of research on history and the Bible and the mechanics of,
they're all hundreds and millennia years old, and like it's right.
Our biology and all of that, it's all connected. And I believe that there's a formula for man to live 1,000 years. And I believe we once had that formula. And I believe it was taken from us by certain things that occurred. 2,000 years ago, I have evidence that I'm putting together, or proof from research, I guess you would call it, that states that our geometrical grid shifted back then. And because it shifted and we didn't shift with it due to the mechanisms not being in play, our lifespan retarded, for lack of a better word. And we went from 1,000 to 100, 120 years. And that's our max as of now. I believe in this next generation, with the work that BurnEye and others are doing, and what Jeremiah and I'm doing with fractals, and I haven't even brought up primary water yet, all that is going to come into play to extend our lives. I fully believe that.
Yeah, I don't even think we need to cover primary water right now, honestly, because it's just one of those things that's so simple and comes with this. Like it comes right along with this, and the key. I will say this, since this is stuff that we've learned based on our ridiculous amount of investigation, research into electroculture, probably goes well above and beyond what would be considered an obsession for some of us, anyways. But just looking into it, like my principle on doing research is obsess about it completely to the nth degree during that time you've devoted to the research. So if you're going to spend 2 days learning about something, or a week learning about something, 100% of your devotion and focus should be into that one singular thing, because the human brain learns best when it's not pulled in too many directions.
Focus on it, get it done, but usually multitasking on many, but it's like they're in stages while you get that one thing just complete.
Like, this is one of those pieces of life advice on how to be a genius. Learn how to focus on one thing with a singular focal point as a goal. Have some kind of a goal that you want to get out of whatever you're doing, so that motivation is there. But don't divulge into all these other distractions and many directions in hopes that one of them will suddenly catch your attention and be entertaining. Instead, learn to the depth of whatever you're going to learn about something so you become an expert in that field. And you'll be surprised that it doesn't take very long. I mean, to basically be functional at a level of, hey, I can now do something with this, for the most part, in terms of the physical, farming, electroculture, electrical experimentation, electrical engineering, and all that stuff, you can learn most of that stuff in a matter of days or weeks to be proficient at doing it yourself. Now, stuff like code, that can take a lot longer. Things that are complicated mathematical systems involve the learning of basically a new language, a language of symbology in the physics and mathematical community, that they've sort of created and reused these old Greek and Roman and Sumerian symbols to represent certain functions in physics. And that's a whole language on its own. You've got to learn all that stuff, and that's why it takes a while. It's man-made, it's not natural. But if it just comes to natural stuff, you can learn almost anything in just a couple of days. So I
totally agree with this, and I can relate because my ADHD, it forced me to sort of have to relook at how I learn in general and how I process. And I'm a very hands-on learner, so I feel like that's the main difference with trying to work in like a lecture type setting, which is why I actually didn't do very well in college, but I'm looking to go back. And I was grandfathered in, but my brain is very creative actually, and I was allowed to have a very hands-on experience with a neurologist when I started in sleep medicine.
Oh, that's very cool. Do you work in sleep medicine right now? Is that what you're doing currently?
I actually was laid off from the hospital I last worked at in January. So right now I'm actually looking at becoming a psilocybin facilitator, potentially a licensed massage therapist, because I want to eventually incorporate like obviously Eastern medicine, reflexology, like the chiropractic type avenue, because I feel like it's all connected. Like I would love to be able to do acupuncture, but I also am like super fascinated in the frequency aspect of things, especially because of my experience with EEG and actually in front of me seeing the effects of like our internet through the brainwaves and seeing what it would do versus like, when I
that is fascinating
all the time, right? And then it's like, well, what is this interference? That would be a little. I always remember going, "What the hell am I looking at?"
Because as you did this at that, let me ask you some technicals then. Perfect time to ask you some technical questions since you actually have life experience in working with the equipment. As far as EEG goes, in the hospital setting, when you set it up on a patient, and I've seen 16 probe systems, 32 probe systems, and I've seen some that can work with as little as I think 4. What were you used to seeing, like as far as the implementation, and how sensitive was it to like trying to get the signal quality up so that it was actually useful?
Oh, so like where you placed it was very important. You could tell, like I could look at someone's hookup and be like, something's off. And here's the other thing, so when you're doing these they call it the 10-20 system, because you're actually getting the signal from across the brain. And then it's specific to each lobe center of the brain. So you're doing the frontal lobe separately, you're doing the occipital, the meridian, you're doing if that in the central, if that makes sense. You're pointing that out, but then you're also cross-referencing that, like the central to the frontal, and the meridian to the occipital. But then, so the occipital ones are where I can actually see your eye movement. So when you're in REM sleep.
If you don't mind me asking, sorry to cut you off, but if you don't mind me asking, are these extracranial contact probes that go directly on the surface of the skin on the skull?
Yes. Yeah, like we have to prep it, so we have to scrape the scalp. Not scrape, when I say scrape, that makes it sound like it's really harsh. No, you just you exfoliate it, like I have to pull the hair away and then place it directly onto the scalp, yeah.
So do you have any hair?
You don't have a good connection.
So, I mean, do you have to cut the hair, or is it pretty much just you have to clean off all the dead skin from the scalp so you get a good electrical contact, and you just kind of, bend the hair out of the way and get some good contact?
I will say I've had like some really interesting patients and situations that they're in. So like you have to improvise, like dreaded type hair situations,
Oh, yeah, I understand.
But like, yeah, I mean, I did everything possible because it made a big difference. And, I could tell because again, you get, and that was something that the reason my doctor pushed me forward so quickly into through the process and through, like, I ended up going into days and doing a lot of work that way. But I was scoring sleep studies was because I was really good at patterns. So it was like you get so used to what it's supposed to look like that you can tell when there's like the tiniest interruption. So like I was really good. So like the type of studies I did too, I didn't always see a ton of seizures, but we did see partial seizures, and those are actually really hard to point out because they're like, fractions of a second, and then you have to.
What does that look like on the EEG when somebody actually experiences a partial seizure and you're actually looking at those wave shapes? What happens?
This is something too where, and let me see if I can get. I've tried to stack up some good like pictures, so let me see if I can find something that like shows.
Awesome. I'll enable you to try to share it.
Okay, great. And so the partial seizure looks really quick, but it's a very, very sharp fire of the brain. So it's like if I slow it way down, it's still a very sharp firing. And so the same thing with like the grand mal type seizure, you get like a lot of sharp firing. And if you guys are, here's the other thing is that, here, let me show actually, if it's okay.
Yeah, go ahead and you can share. You can choose to share a screen or a window.
Can I share? We don't have to watch the whole thing, but like, so that you guys kind of understand like what we're looking at before I even show you what maybe I should show you what brainwaves look like first, and that there's a video there is a video I have that does a really good job of showing like what you're actually looking at with how the neuron is actually firing. So what the two difference, you're looking at something called an EPSP versus an IPSP. And that's the actual electrical firing between the synapses. So just to kind of explain what EEG is, you know what I'm saying?
Awesome.
Can I interrupt it for a sec?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, so everybody that's out there, this is MindFull Exposures. Hello, Estra. How are you? Austin, by the way, you just jumped into it, both feet. I freaking love it. I'm telling you. Awesome work you did.
It's been a long time, and I'm like, I think I've been itching for this. Like, so you all know I'm trying to do a little documentary series because I want to try to not oversimplify, but break it down a little bit on the connection between, or try to help. And maybe, I don't know how much you guys have seen. There's other people who, explain this, but trying to explain what the biofield is and how 0 point energy connects. So I would like to do this is for like people like my parents. And I'm not trying to
hit the present button at the bottom, Estra, and feel free to share away with all of your pictures and videos and channels, and post the links in the private chat or in the main chat, and then I'll share them in all of the chats, and definitely let's put this out there. And no way you've been itching for this just a little bit, right?
This is freaking cool, man. All that, like, I'm going to learn more about EEG in this conversation than everything that I've probably seen online so far, right? Because this is firsthand, and this is what I want to know. I've worked with people who build the EEG equipment. I actually calibrated for a company and did their frequency precision equipment.
That's the other thing, because I am still a licensed sleep tech. Like even though I was laid off, like I still hold my licensure, and I've considered going back, but I feel like I want to do something else, is what I was getting at. And I still would love. So there is something called biofeedback, which I might have gotten into before, but that's they use EEG to monitor your brain activity while they're doing something called it's really sound, pulse, and vibration therapy, or light, not vibration. I just said the same thing twice. Yeah, and so what they're trying to do is rewire your brain activity in like a trauma type situation. And so that is something I feel on the experimental level, especially with what we've all talked about in frequency aspect, I would die to be able to be in that kind of research. Like my mom really wanted me to take this job at the University of Eugene because it was with the NIH, but it was like part-time. It was like the situation, it wasn't great, for pay. It would be like, but it was just directly associating mental disorder with obstructive sleep apnea. And I dealt so much with, in my opinion, over excessive prescription of CPAPs and in some cases ventilatory equipment. So I really would like to take that to another level. And I feel like if you guys have heard of ALS, which is very much connected to your central nervous system, that's where you lose all functionality of your muscles over time, and specifically with your breathing is one of the huge ones. And so you have to be placed, on ventilatory equipment, but it's about that misfiring, like what's going on. And so this is something like I would really want to get into deeper. Okay, anyway, let me share my screen. And I don't have a thing that says, because I'm using Firefox, I won't have audio, will I?
You may have to open
your box that says share audio with it, but hopefully, yeah, you may.
Firefox won't let me.
Yeah, maybe.
It's okay. I'll open my Chrome that I never use and put them in there.
It might be there. You might just have the mouse over it.
Yeah, it's all good. It's
no Firefox. There's issues. She knows what she's talking about.
So, Asra, when Bernie has this get together and you come out,
hell yeah,
we could rent that EEG out here and do some tests with the coils and have you monitor.
I might be able to get us one because I have enough. I just have to contact these manufacturers. There's tons of options, and then get the software. And because I already know this, I can teach you guys.
We have to set that up. We have to get that going. That would be amazing.
Controlled EEG experiments, especially when we're talking about all these super weird effects, and we can generate these types of fields which do have an effect on human psychology. This is one of the strange phenomena that we really can't get much into, but some of these fields will have a very visceral effect on human psychology.
Full Woo Wednesday today, aren't we?
That would provide some heavy data.
Actual data.
Yeah, it would be awesome to analyze all that at the end of it.
Exactly. Okay, use Chrome. Okay, I think I got it. Yeah.
Not to mention, if you do the acupuncture, I would love to do a test while you're doing acupuncture with the coils running as like an antenna, and the acupuncture needles would pick up that energy. And then run the EEG at the same thing. What's
no
that?
way. Seriously? You were thinking the two?
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Before, my mind was like, oh, what could we do with yeah, exactly. It's awesome. This is actually sorry, go ahead.
No, my bad. I was just saying great minds think alike. You go ahead.
Not your bad at all.
Woo, right? It's kind of woo, but it's not, because this is where we stick the woo on the logger and actually record what that woo looks like in electrical signals.
And that's kind of fascinating about my past before getting into this science-like field.
Like woo,
I was very into ghosts, and I was fascinated in it. I would always say, what are they and how can we measure it? And, I have my own theories on it now, but anyway, I feel like it's all connected.
It is connected.
It is.
Ghosts are actually residual conscious plasma that has been, like, as in the scientific community, they talk about you spin up a vortex and that field stays there for a while after the machine shut off. Well, it's the same effect in a sense. You have, and it's usually over top of a water crossing that's underground or somewhere in there, and there's an ionization of the air that is created at the moment of that person's death, therefore taking a snapshot of their consciousness and replaying throughout time when that energy builds up, hence a ghost. That's
if I may.
Bam. For me, I mean, that's what you say. I mean, I could never describe it that way. But yeah, that's great.
There is a mechanism, a way to build a machine to produce this kind of effect. And I loosely use the word effect because when we're talking about a quote-unquote ghost, this can basically be a concentrated energy that has a fixed path and is kind of like a cold neutrino, cold plasma. semi-covalent state where you have this assembly of energy that is not necessarily phase shifted into this time frame reference. It's sort of like a virtual mass, virtual matter. And it's highly affected by certain signals. So we used to go and do these weird ghost hunts when we were younger, and well, we
That sounds like a
Tesla
ghost
coils and high voltage
That's
multipliers,
so cool.
all kinds of fun stuff, and brought detection equipment, quote unquote ghost detectors, basically op amps and comparator circuits that were tuned to be like right on the edge of triggering and could pick up subtle fields. They'd go off and show us an amplitude reading if there was something weird going on. Not quite, not quite a magnetometer, not quite a tri-field meter, but something that picks up a different type of field flux that's generally not looked for. But there's a way that Adam figured out. Space Case Zero comes on every so often. He built this strange thing called the Curious Device. And you probably have, are you familiar with the story of Adam's Curious Device?
Not closely enough. I just know who that is. Yeah.
Well, let me just explain what that thing did, because we've done a lot of discussing, him and I, about it, and various other experiments that we've had similar kind of effects from. And it turns out that there's actually a few variables where if we discuss them, we could probably figure out how to optimize and build a machine specifically for the purpose of producing a pure temporal compression torsion field. So word salad, yeah, temporal compression torsion field. But what we're effectively doing there is we're taking space-time and we're putting a twist on it in a clockwise direction on one side and a counterclockwise direction on the other. If you flip over, looking at the other side head on, then you'll be seeing clockwise. So it basically is, if you're on either side of it, you're looking at clockwise, and the thing that's across from it is counter-rotating. But what we're doing here is taking a magnetic and an electric flux simultaneously, pointing with the same vector axes, and we're rotating them through physical motion opposite to each other with a high voltage electrical charge on these materials. And one of the keys here is that these materials, they have to be able to hold a large amount of electric charge. So say, for example, Alexei Cherikov's Gravity Flyer, big mystery there in terms of how it works. And it's been trouble to replicate the darn thing. A lot of people have tried. Even I have my own version, but I didn't properly treat my discs yet. And so I'm not quite happy with it. But the idea is the discs themselves have an aluminum oxide coating. They hold a large amount of charge. Well, what Adam found out is when he ran this machine, it is made of two 18-inch discs. Each one contains, I think he said it was 50 segments. I could be wrong on that number, but they are galvanized steel, which is tin-plated steel. So they're magnetic, each of these segments, and they're very close to each other, meaning they can actually spark to each other, kind of like a Wimshurst machine. These two discs rotate, and when they're synced up, because there's magnetic elements on them, just like the Tictoc Methodica device, these segments will flip polarity randomly in terms of their magnetic polarization. They'll just flip around as they gain and lose charge, because those charges have a direct magnetic field effect on the polarizable magnetic field moment of each of the domains of the iron atoms inside of those plates. So what he gets, okay, I'll get to the end of the story. I'm just describing the details of the device.
So
people that want to replicate it don't have an idea how they might be able to do it. So we've got two 18-inch discs. Each one has 50 segments on it. The segments are, cut like pizza slices. They're very close to each other, and they go to about 2/3 of the diameter to the inside, all the way to the edge. And so they're charged up to a high voltage. And as they counter-rotate across each other on the backside of 1/8 inch thick or 1/4 inch thick 18-inch acrylic discs, and they're glued on, they flip polarity. And what this device does is the electric fields of each disc, they try to connect to the other disc. So you have every single atom with an ionized or non-uniform electric charge, and every single electron that is in excess of being in the valence shell of an atom, every single one of those little charges tries to connect to an opposite charge on the other disk. And so what's constantly happening is they're forming and connecting fields, and because the disks are counter-rotating, but they're basically geostationary, meaning that their center axis is staying in the same place in relationship to the room, the ground, and the earth, you have this rotating but fixed-in-place field, and those electric charges form straight little connection lines between each other, and then as the disks rotate away from each other, their connections get stretched and stretched and stretched, and they snap. They basically snap to a new charge. And every time that action happens, it creates a little fluctuation in the 0-point polarization, or that scalar electrostatic and magnetic potential for epsilon and mu of that local space-time. And it ends up creating so much energy emission at such short wavelengths that it generates like a white noise radiated field of insanely high amplitude. And what that does is screw with time. It literally screws with time to the point where he can walk up to it with a temporal differential meter and see the two clock chips drifting away from each other because they happen to be 10 inches apart. And that's enough where one chip is closer to the device than the other because time is flowing differently around that thing in two counter-rotating toroidal fields, where it'll actually screw with the meter and show that one chip totally changes its clock frequency. Here's the freakier part, though. Even after you shut it off, that T field stays. It sticks around. It seems to be attached to both the machine and the environment.
And it does it fluctuate? Like, does it?
It does. It fluctuates back and forth at about 1 hertz. But wait, this is the weird part, and back into the EEG where this relates directly to you. A lot of people that he brought in when he built this machine some 20 years ago, they couldn't stand to be around it. He would run it, basically power it up, spin it up, and let it charge up. And he said that some people literally went running out of the place and down the street and would not talk to him again.
I was wondering.
One of his friends, another one just dashed the heck out of there, and it was like a couple of weeks before he made communication again. This thing freaked people the heck out because of the temporal differential. Like it got their fight or flight instinct way triggered, and their EEG signals were probably being affected because one side of their brain or the other, whether it was their frontal lobe that was closer to the machine as they were walking towards it, or it was right hemisphere, left hemisphere, or cerebral cortex, it didn't matter because there was a little difference in the rate flow of time, and that screwed with the neurological synapse firing so much that these people kind of lost their freaking minds. Now, he felt this too, and he knew what was going on, so he withstood it. And I felt the same thing, and have gotten some very ill effects from it. This can screw people up. This is dangerous, dangerous crap.
Yeah, okay. Have you ever touched an electrical fence and didn't know you were going to touch it? So it took you,
Yep.
For a whirlwind. So that feeling you get. Was it kind of like that, where it's almost like there's this weird nausea? Also feels like there's this heavy presence on you, kind of.
Well, I've been hit hard enough to feel a weight on my chest, like I was just body slammed by somebody, and be seeing stars.
Yeah, I grew up with two older brothers. I've had the one time. I call them bleachers too. So and I have interesting central sleep apnea. We can get into that a little bit. I don't have a lot of it, but anyway, and head injuries and the association with that, and how your brain activity changes. Here's the other thing, stroke. What you're looking at right now is the left hand. You see where it has the arrow and it says arousal. Funny enough, I would actually put that back quite a bit. Here was my
looking at it. I can see where the arrow is pointing, but how can you tell is the arousal the little tick mark that indicates a fast transience?
No, it's the if you can notice, here's this activity right here is quite a bit. Not just quite a bit, but it's slower than the activity right here.
Yeah, much lower frequency.
So right here.
The fluctuations there on the right side past the EMG2 to EMG3, where we see the sudden increase in the differential between these signals. That's what we're looking at, right? We're looking at the differential suddenly spiking.
Yeah. So now here's what's tricky and what you have to differentiate. This looks more heightened and thicker right here, right? But if you look at this activity and this activity, would actually explain. So that's artifact is making it look bold like that. So that's how I can distinguish, okay, no, the arousal actually starts back here. There's a little touch where they're trying to go back to sleep in these lobes, but in these lobes, they're awake. This one, see, now this is interesting because this right here is almost indicating they were maybe coming out of REM. And it is actually not that abnormal to have breathing disruptions in REM, which is really interesting compared to delta. And both of those are supposed to be restorative stages of sleep. But what was I getting at that we were talking about? Because I wasn't trying to get into like
we were talking about strange psychophysical effects and ghosts and how it kind of all relates back to these fields.
Oh yeah, that's. I mean,
oh yeah, we got so far into the woo that basically we're 3 levels deep now, and so I don't blame you. For, like
you were talking about kind of like with this. So that you're hurt if you're thinking about like your brain activity in the different stages are different hurts. Like why So when you were describing what this experiment, it was like I immediately got that vibe. Like this would alter. This is, in my mind, like a bigger variance than adjusting our music to 440 hertz versus 432. Like that's less noticeable.
Yeah, that's a lot less noticeable. This is much more visceral.
Signal through sound. Well, vibration. Sorry, I mean it's more complex than just sound. Because what he's right, like what he's emitting is ultimately giving off a vibration.
Right, and that's what we want to really find out is how these things can affect psychology. So we actually have I'm sure that I would get this stream bumped if I tried to show them now, but we have a whole bunch of patents
at the
that
end
talk directly. Well, probably shouldn't anyways. It's just sort of like using that keyword list that we found out gets a bunch of trolls automatically sent here, and then the whole entire thing kind of goes to heck in a handbasket. Now that we know those terms, thank you, Simon, for making that clear. Right.
Shout out to my moms who I just helped finish moving after a month every day. Finally, she's at a good new spot, but got all of these different flower seeds from her, as well as the soils, all the pots, and now the water is ready. So I'm gonna stop interrupting you guys. And
you're not interrupting. That's actually a really, really nice seed holder. Then you got the containers. I think that's pretty fantastic. Right? But I do want to say, get that thing the heck out of the sunlight, man. You don't want those temperatures.
Oh yeah. Good call. Just brought the seed.
Some money so he can buy a like one of those canvas tent things that is real tall and covers like a backyard area, and then you can put all the stuff back there.
Because the vending tent, she took some damage this winter. The snow was heavy. The roof is caving in. I don't know how long it's going to last. I don't know how long she's going to last. She survived 10 months, but not last winter. The mannequin graveyard.
So that's how you're outdoors and indoors at the same time. Now I understand. See, I never quite got that. I didn't realize it was a vending tent.
Yes,
weird additional room on your house.
Right, genius usage of space.
I mean, you made the thing practically into a solid structure. There's artwork all over the place. And I just figured it was part of the house.
It's an extension of the BurnEye.
Man, I wish I could have one of those.
There's a young BurnEye.
I love it.
Yeah.
Oh, hey, G, what you should hold on. Yeah. Oh, this is cool. Hey, take just a brief moment there, G. Keep that stuff right in front of you when Bernie's done showing his stuff out. Because I want to put this on full screen.
Yeah. Baby, is that the one? There we go.
Nice.
Man,
I got lots of these from.
I'm gonna go to a local organic farm and get some seeds here. I have some, but they're not. They're old now.
Where I ordered these from, and that's in the States.
My seeds aren't packaged as pretty, but we all have our seeds now, it looks like.
Welcome, Liminal.
Yeah, these are heirlooms.
Hello. Good morning, everyone.
Hi.
Be kind to yourself. All right, I'm shutting my camera off now. Thanks, guys.
No, man, we got a lot of our seeds. We've got a lot of work to do. In terms
a lot of startup work, yeah.
We expect electroculture to seriously speed up the process. So getting back to the EEG stuff, though, I was loving the practical explanation because, I've seen these EEG machines. You can get these little boxes. They're not probably anywhere near as nice as some of these pro medical units, but I mean they are functional and there'll be like 16 probes in general for most of the kits. And USB compatible on some of the newer ones. Some of the older ones they just go directly to like a VGA display output, which is kind of funny, but easy to assemble your own right, and you can record that with some software. So
Yeah.
Talking about the
And
setup
I
and how
can
to run one of those. That's
It's
awesome
easy.
to learn about it.
Well, and then to learn the 10-20 method, which is how you measure the head, and then so you know where to place everything. That's actually, I mean, with your knowledge, all of you guys could easily learn that. So I could teach you that. But this example too that I had up isn't actually a full one. It's missing in 4 headlines. And the one thing is that I'm showing you this this is what a sleep hookup looks like versus like a full EEG. Often they actually don't monitor EMG. They don't monitor your breathing or your oxygen because those don't generally fluctuate as you're a healthy person during the day. But I actually think it would be relevant and important to monitor all of that, especially the EMG, because it's like leg twitching and, like we did a lot of restless leg.
Oh, yeah, that would be important. The other thing I'd like to monitor too, because I haven't really seen a lot of good graphs or layouts for it, is just take 2 of the spare channels and measure the general E flux and B flux at the center of the skull, just to...
Oh, they have, like there's like your end report, like does all that for you. Like you want the full differential of everything. Is that what you're saying?
I'm not talking about brain signals here. I'm talking about actually logging on the same chart, using those extra 2 channels to log external environmental contributors that are electrical or magnetic, and synchronize them with how we're seeing the response in the EEG. That's what I really want to look for, is how do these signals screw with the human brain in a very directly measurable way.
That was part of my job. It was just, you wrote it in text. Just see, like, if something happened, you had to, describe like what, because like the brain activity would change if let's just say like their phone went off unexpectedly, which usually we had them turn it off, but like it would alter like what was going on. So I had to like just type in what was happening. We had video, but it wasn't like it was synced up like you're talking about, which I definitely agree we need to have. Like, and are you talking about having an actual like frequency measurement?
Yeah, well, basically what we would look for is we'd have 2 pros. One, we would filter out most of the noise by, instead of using a coil, we would use a simple Hall effect sensor with a eddy blacking plate. So something like against a piece of bismuth, and the Hall effect sensors on the front. What that would do is pick up any kind of magnetic fluxes that were to enter it. So if we just sort of summarize a single axis, we can say, okay, the magnetic field changed here. Then if we had some kind of high frequency EM signal, we could simply use 2 high-speed rectifiers that were voltage biased as part of the probe, and that would measure the electric potential. So say like you put an ionizer on in the room, and you might be able to directly correlate as the ions are hitting the body and causing these little electrical spikes. You would be able to see it on the EEG, how it's affecting brain waves.
So I'm wondering if we should consider a different type of measuring the brain activity, which, if I'm remembering correctly, is with like a PET scan. No, there's another one. Why can't I think of it right now? It's an electromagnetic, and it gives more of like
a functional MRI for brain scanning, or
yeah, it's like that. But I thought it was a little different, but maybe I'm just not thinking correctly right now. I'm double checking. Sorry, 1 second.
Oh, no problem. At some point, hopefully I don't forget, I want to get your opinion on the God helmet, if you're familiar.
Not the marketed
product. There's a marketed product that's tried to steal the name. The original work was done by a scientist in controlled laboratory conditions. He used 4 electromagnets being ran off a audio amplifier and mounted them inside of a motorcycle helmet, and ran that off of a machine in the other room, a little audio studio machine. At the same time, did full EEG measurements on the patients wearing the helmet, and he was able to induce a state in almost all of the patients where he'd shut the lights off, close the door, the room was extremely quiet, machines aren't really making any noise, and he would then start to ramp these coils at different frequencies, and he would watch the EEG response, mapping it live with the input frequencies of a 2-phase coil system. It's just 2-phase, but there was right and left channel basically, so crisscross, and he was able to bring the EEG into a state where the people were still fully awake, but they experienced what happens in sleep paralysis to some extent on the conscious level, and almost all of them reported feeling entities or spirits or other
Oh.
things in the room with them. And
Yeah.
those signals he recorded on the EEG to know exactly what that looked like when the brain was making this assumption that there's something there with you and triggering that kind of response. So I thought,
Jeremiah, what you're referring to is what he had termed the sensed presence that the volunteers, or the people helping them conduct the research and actually going into the helmet, the sensed presence is stimulating particular parts of the brain, but the main one was the temporal lobe. And so he theorized from there that this area, along with a few other regions of the brain, evolved over time to give us this sense of connection, the sense of otherness, so that we could have those spiritual experiences. And then from there, you kind of draw your own conclusions on what that means. If you're actually connecting to something, or if it's evolutionary results of consciousness coping with mortality. You can get very existential from there. But yeah, I believe you're referring to Persinger.
Hey, there you go. That's it.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Persinger.
Thank you.
Persinger. Yeah. So that's the guy that worked on it. He was based out of Ontario, I believe, Canadian. And this is way back in like the early 2000s. So yeah, it's been around for quite a while. By this point, everyone, not everyone, but people interested in this kind of stuff and interested in actually getting the results and the kind of results that you can get from EEG or from magnetic transcranial stimulation. This is where you're actually going to get some of that empirical data that people feel or think is missing from the research. That
I would agree with the skeptics to some extent here, because I do think that there's a tremendous lack of the research compared to how much claims are being made and how many claims are being made on this topic. There's a big discrepancy here in this science compared to other medical science, and that's because people really haven't, like, oh man, I hate
Have
to
you
say
guys
it, but
heard
the FDA doesn't regulate this.
Well, sorry, you guys have heard of narcolepsy, right?
Yes,
absolutely.
Yep. So sleep paralysis is directly associated with narcolepsy. Most narcolepsy patients experience it. And what's happening is they're not properly their REM cycle. It's like their cycles are completely messed up. So the minute they fall asleep, they usually go into REM. It usually causes some kind of startle awake. I'm saying that term wrong. There's an actual precise term for it, but it's so then what it does is it causes them to wake, but they're still, your body paralyzes itself. It releases hormones so that you don't enact your dreams. And then in that case is so what's happening is you're waking up in the REM stage, and which is why you hallucinate, because think about what dreams are. This is why this is interesting too, because I've actually had sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I don't mean to interject, but this perfectly segues into territory that really gets me excited about the explorations of neuroscience seeking to explain conscious phenomena. Are you familiar with Thomas Metzinger? If I can't pronounce his name.
Yeah,
Thomas,
I think that's right.
Metzinger. Yes, he actually some of his earlier work back from like the earlier 2000s, he simulated the sense of an out-of-body experience by using virtual reality. And, so it was...
this case is so good.
There is this conflicting visual somatosensory input in the virtual reality that would disrupt the people participating in the research, and it would kind of create this jarring effect where they were in and out of their bodies. And so
let's explain the scenario here, because I'm guessing that actually probably most people haven't heard of this study. So what they did, I mean, you want to explain exactly how he set it up to create this kind of surreal experience for the participants? Or would you like me?
So he actually used virtual reality to he had people exposed to a virtual reality environment where they're getting visual and sensory input. If
I may, so here's what he did.
Yeah.
He took these people and he had them stand straight up. In most cases, I think he also did some with them sitting down. And as they're standing there, actually, I believe most of them were done sitting down later on because he found it's easier for them to kind of integrate this. So they're wearing a VR helmet, and they're looking at a VR picture of somebody that's sitting in a chair just like them, or standing in a room just like them. And usually this is a mannequin for the experimental sake, but they're watching the mannequin. They can move their heads around, and it maps to move the head of the thing that they're watching. So they get to this association that what they're looking at is their own back, even though it's not actually them. It's a VR simulation of a 3D character. And so in order to entrain the mind that this thing they're looking at from a third-person view is themselves, even though it's actually not a video of themselves, somebody comes up, one of the scientists comes up from behind, and a VR secondary character comes in from behind the VR character they're looking at, which they associate with themselves, the one that's responsive to their body movements. And so the secondary VR character strokes their back or taps their head or does various things physically to the body, and the other person in the room, the scientist, also taps their physical body as they're sitting there, so that there's an association made with, oh, that thing that I'm seeing is actually just me. Then to check the EEG response, now a threat is introduced. Somebody comes up behind the virtual character that's not them with a hammer, but this time no other scientist is in the room. They're just observing. And the person will usually react when they see this by jumping out of the chair, or there's a huge spike in the EEG response or a fear response because they've associated the virtual character with themselves through the sensory entrainment done to their physical bodies. And it was amazing how complete the link was with these people's minds and the virtual character that was created. They really, got this was what they were looking at.
Sorry, really quick, if you guys have heard of REM behavior disorder, that's where you act out your dreams. It's like me seeing it on the other side. Like they're enacting it through the VR set, right? But it's like these people get up and they literally are acting out what they're seeing in front of them.
Right. Oh yeah. This is the physical kinesmatic VR, the kind that I actually think would be not so terrible if environments were designed around it. But so, people destroyed their own TVs and stuff because of VR incidents. Now that's funny enough on its own.
This early work that he did was a basis for what he termed the phenomenal self model, which is the content of all of your bodily sensations, your emotional state, your perceptions, your memories, any actions you might be taking, any thoughts you might be thinking. And he wrote this great book called the Ego Tunnel. And it does get a bit dense. It's deep, not just into the neuroscience and psychology, but also the philosophy as well. And it through these experiments, he kind of dissects what really is the self. So if anybody's interested in out-of-body experiences, just to summarize that guy up, and is willing to chew on a book, he's got the Ego Tunnel out there, and numerous papers. He's moved on since then and has done further work on studying the nature of the self. So lots of interesting stuff there.
Fascinating. I'm really getting actually into that right now more, and I'm doing a lot of research on trauma actually, and the type of data that is actually the studies that have been done to show the effects and the type of, like, have you guys heard of neuro-linguistic programming?
Oh yeah, I mean that's been around for decades.
Yeah. So just that kind of idea. Obviously, there's more to it, and but
the philosophy of how they try to sell it, I find a little disturbing. but yeah, the
That's like crazy, right?
techniques the techniques that are employed are interesting to see, like who they work on or how they work. But I steer away from NLP just because of the philosophy backing it up. It's a little too much.
I get that, but what is interesting is there's other forms of that in a sense. There's something called like NAT now too, but the data behind actually the effectiveness of it, and really what I think it's just getting down to again is that trauma. And this is sort of hard because these are things that I think we as a population, we feel we're tough. We've gotten through these things. I don't have these issues. This isn't it. And so this is more of like something that maybe is beneath the surface. But just for my own personal experience, like I was, half-assed diagnosed by, and don't mean to be rude, but I had better success with like a naturopath type doctor, which was an MD too. But anyway,
I believe you.
Sorry, go ahead. Say that again.
Oh no, I'm all the way with you on. You're probably helping yourself better than going to just an average therapist, and then you probably had to find a more natural path towards your wellness. So
and this is actually connected to endometriosis. I can't even say it all of a sudden. Endometriosis.
It's fine. I'm tongue tied this morning too.
Okay, good. I also drank maybe too much coffee already. But anyway, yeah. So that in itself, this with the emotional aspect of that is sort of what I'm connecting it to. Is there's rage and anger associated with endometriosis, and that it causes heavy clotting, heavy pain, that kind of thing. So that fascinated me. It fascinated me when I had to think about when that started for me, and it potentially had to do with actually like a best friend of mine. This is, and I'm getting super personal, guys, but I'm a total TMI person. But a best friend of mine got like my first boyfriend ever. They hooked up, like she got to stay out or whatever. So they it was like homecoming night, and they hooked up, and afterwards we had discussed it, and I felt like, because I'm a pretty calm person overall when it comes to like forgiving people and going through the grudges and stuff, and so I forgave them both and felt that I had forgiven them really well. Well, what happened was I went through a phase after that, and that best friend I tried pot for the first time, and she disowned me as a friend because of that. I had anger over that. I think because of what I had forgiven her for, and what she couldn't forgive me for, kind of a thing. And so anyway, that was directly associated when I started having, and there's another thing a little more personal too, but that when that time started for me. So this is me, breaking down that emotional state of what happened, how it affected me, and what it turned into. And now I'm actually working really hard on that forgiveness. I've also done acupuncture, which was amazing, and found out that it's, there's some digestive issues connected, and like how much digestive stuff is connected to our wellness and our emotional brain, obviously, because of that second brain concept. I'm sure you guys have talked about.
There's most of our serotonin is in our guts. So
exactly.
I mean, make your gut happy, your mood actually does improve. So
yeah. But I do feel like there's still people that can eat like the most processed crappy food and not have problems, and I think sometimes that comes down to
later in life. It catches up with everybody. It's just I think some people. I think it's a partially also body awareness as well. They seem fine, but they're not as sensitive kinesthetically, for one reason or another, and so they don't realize that they're having health issues until it's very severe and it can't be ignored.
And that's sort of what I'm getting at too, was like maybe forgotten traumas that we hadn't, we thought we dealt with, but we, and so it's just because you've heard of, and I've talked about this before on the show, but German New Medicine and his concept is this is, right and left brain, like you hurt your left knee, it's associated with the right part of your brain, feminine versus masculine. Maybe you had an issue with a female or a male, and then it's breaking it down to like what's that emotion.
I'm thinking of Alexander Lowen. He did some pioneering psychological work in looking at rigidity in different parts of people's body and figuring out that they were locked up and they didn't have as much mobility in certain areas of the body because they were holding on to trauma. And so through a combination of talk therapy and movement exercises and some kind of probably woo sounding stuff, he helped people release that body trauma. And if that's the area that you are speaking to, if you haven't heard of this book, I invite you to check it out. It's also another pretty chunky book, but highly recommended. The Body Keeps Score. Have you heard of that?
Sorry, I've read that. So I, for some reason, I didn't directly connect that part of it to it, but I probably have it marked because I want to go back and reread it. I just finished it.
There's so much information in that book. It sounds like it's a soft, fluffy, feminine book or something, but like you open it up and there's like tons of information in there. And if you want to learn from it, you're bookmarking a lot of stuff. So The Body Keeps Score. If talk therapy alone hasn't worked for you and you're having aches and pains and you want to come at it from what I would say is the indirect approach, the body is a great way to access a lot of these things because the body holds on to a lot of it.
Sorry, I'm interrupting. Go ahead.
Oh, no, we're both just really excited. That's fine. What were you trying to say?
I'm like, yes. That book is sort of my little Bible at the moment, but it because I reference a lot out of it actually, and I I'm going to utilize a lot of the information out of it when I was putting together the documentary. Because I think the data out of it, and that's what I was getting at. I thought he did address NLP in that book, but he does a really good job of overviewing a little bit of the history on neurofeedback as well. And then just really good, like he intermits little stories in there, but a lot of people say it's like, if you're seeking therapy, to be careful with that book because they say it's more of a textbook versus but if you, and that's
if you're an unusual pioneering individual and you've realized early on in life that you kind of have the ability to self-heal, we're not recommending this as diagnostic medical healing advice, but you know yourself best. And if you're one of those people that likes to go out there and learn stuff, it's a great book to learn from. I'm going to post it in Crypto Alchemist.
Yeah, do that.
I'll post the title there because it's actually a longer title, and I'll give the people the.
And another one that you should read if you haven't. I haven't actually gotten to read just yet, but both those books were recommended to me. She's probably not in here. Her name's Mish. She's a nurse in London. Super cool, super cool chick. Anyway, she recommended another one that's called When the Body Says No. I'm going to pull it up so I can pull it out of my bag here really quick so I can tell you the author.
So yeah, I just posted The Body Keeps the Score, Brain, Mind, and Body in the Healing of Trauma by Bessel van der Kolk.
Yes, thank you. That is his name. I think when you said it, I heard something else.
I might have mispronounced that. I did my best. It is correctly typed in. But for everyone that might not be watching Crypto Alchemist's chat, it's in there. And if you could just pin it for everybody really briefly. I saw some people saying they'd like to know what that book was. That would be helpful.
What I'm going to do is I'll get the Amazon links for you guys. How does that sound?
Yeah, I wasn't sure about posting it, but yeah, it's cool to post Amazon links. Yeah, go ahead.
And it is. I'm pretty sure, right?
I don't know.
I think I've seen other people do it, but mostly because like they're promoting their own books. You know, I
Right.
think.
Oh, there's Bernie. Yeah, Bernie,
Yeah,
we were
I
just
heard. I got it.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that was the picture I was trying to show.
Change a tire. Well, hopefully you're all good, Gerald. And I just see
Oh,
the tire
yeah.
chat, so, you posted it in crypto. Oh, there we.
I got
The Body Keeps the Score is a book that at least
Sure.
one or two people were asking about.
Okay, another one I would recommend in all this too is Super Genes, because that connects the meditation, how that changes the DNA, or change. It shouldn't say changes the DNA necessarily. Their research showed that the end of the DNA, the telomerase would affect. It could be mutated once if you were, if you reproduced, but it did turn on and off the activation centers of the DNA. That's another, I think, good one too, which gets into data and gets, you can get geeky about.
This is why I kind of think epigenetics might be more archetypal than what's considered now. It might not be.
I can copy paste it one more time.
Yes, please.
Sorry, I'm on my phone, so it's a little awkward.
I posted the book already. I already did that link.
There, you should be able to see it again.
The Amazon link.
Oh, she posted the Amazon link, but I can.
Oh, okay. You're just posting the name of it, not a link. I see.
Yeah, it's live.
Yeah, I was just saying for anybody that can't read that chat,
Oops, that N was not supposed to be there at the end, just MD, but I posted it in all of the chats.
Sorry about that.
Here's the other one that I can't post the link for, so. And I'm sorry, I'm not trying to promote Amazon. I just sometimes.
Good. I need to get myself a full Amazon account with all the affiliate links, and might as well, because it's there. Why not us all make just a wee bit off of it? Like get free stuff for the science we're working on from Amazon. I don't know.
In some ways, I think we have to give in to some things. That's what I. It's like
use
I think
the system to change the world for the better.
Cause more problems.
Yeah, actually, I've not read When the Body Says No, but it sounds up my alley in that area of self-healing and trauma research. I'm a woman of many facets, so I'll definitely check out that book as well.
What are you showing us, JP?
Oh, yeah. He's showing us.
Yeah, what we're looking at here, I'll step away from it. So those are, every one of those LEDs there is a 5 watt, all except for one of them, that's a 3 watt. But those are all 5 watt little chip LEDs, and each one of them is a different wavelength. And just to kind of tell you what those wavelengths are, if we're going from the left to the right, grab all these, walk through what they are. I found out, I'll add this ahead of time, I found out that there's a really, really fascinating new technology with LED colors. So previously we have to rely on different elemental compounds being mixed together to form a light-emitting crystal that, when activated and having electrons flow across a regional junction where the electron shells in the crystal can absorb only a specific wavelength and then re-emit it. That's how we used to make LED crystals, InGaN, various things like that. But now they have this new crazy technology, and I didn't even know about it until I got these things in my hands and looked at them. Especially for the blues and the UV LEDs, they actually use a crazy ultra nanoscale diffraction grating type of material. And my guess is it's probably printed via nanolithography onto some optical film. But they actually are using an internal sort of Bragg reflector to selectively produce different wavelengths by using the same pump dye. And that's why we're looking at different brightnesses. So here we go. From the left to the right, those LED wavelengths are, now let me see if I can, I guess I can't really get my mouse on this, but yeah, 940 nanometers, 850 nanometers, 730 nanometers. So those are all considered in the infrared range. Then we go to our first visible, our fully visible, that's the fourth one to the right there, 660 nanometers. Number 5, 620 nanometers. And that's kind of that orangish color. Now we get into our 600 nanometers. They call this orange. And that's going to be number 6 in the slot. It's not quite orange. And then we have our 590 nanometers, which is just about looking the same as that orange at slot number 7. We have green, 520 nanometers, ice blue, 480, blue, 460, royal blue, 450. And then we're starting to get closer to our UVs. We have 420 nanometers, which is still in the deep violet. Now we get to officially UV. 395 nanometers, that's UVA, 385 and 365. So that's the entire chain there. Now, why? Why have all these individual colors of LEDs? People are probably thinking, well, if you just wanted colors, why not simply mix together 3 different colors, RGB? Because these LEDs are not designed to stimulate the human eye. These are designed to stimulate various specialized samples of exotic materials and metamaterials that we are working on manufacturing, and to move something that Brandy Aquino has recently, or he referred to in a paper as a photon gas, but also to move around a positron-electron gas. And that's the real key here, is to find exactly the perfect wavelength within the available LED range that exists on today's market, because that's pretty much the whole darn thing. There's one more that's coming. It's a 1050 nanometers, and that's not here yet, but it's on its way. But we're going to find out exactly what the perfect wavelength is to produce these strange gravitational effects and activate gravitational isotopes. And once we do that, then we just need a whole bunch of that same thing. And this will allow us to selectively choose each individual wavelength one at a time to activate elements. And you can't buy anything like it. Really, the only thing that you can kind of sort of get that's approaching what this thing will do, cheap LEDs, is to build a, what do they call that thing? A supercontinuum laser. A supercontinuum laser uses a pulsed fiber to produce different wavelengths by tuning the mirrors. And you can get, pretty wide wave spread out of one of those things. And I did actually want to build one of those, but it's a lot more expensive than simply buying these off-the-shelf LEDs. And hey, if they can work, this is going to be available for everybody to replicate stupidly easy, because these are on the market now. So.
So I need to buy a whole new set, and my goodness, replace all of the lights with the new lights.
Yeah, there's no. It will be ridiculous to basically to buy these lights. Honestly, there's really no reason to have to get all of those various LED colors unless you want to do science of spectroscopy on them. And stimulation.
Yeah, we go to the lab then.
Oh, by the way, I should mention something else that's kind of cool. Since I have a wide spread of all the colors, and if I put them all on a single heatsink, which I'm going to do, it turns out that laser diodes and LEDs are both subject to wavelength shifting by liquid cooling and nitrogen cooling. So it is possible to actually spread the frequency of each color onto the next step where it's missing in order to perfectly tune them just by simply freezing them, essentially, with liquid nitrogen or something else like that, or bringing them down to a colder temperature until the wavelength shifts. So yeah, we can actually color with that gambit the full spectrum from the 355 nanometers, because our lowest is 365 and we can shift it down 10, all the way up to our 1060 nanometers, which is 10 above where we're at with 1050. So yeah, there we go. Wonder if I should sell a kit for that, if people would find that scientifically useful for experimentation.
Okay. I don't think it's going to hurt anything if you open door.
I'm sure a few people working with the weird sciences will probably find some use in it.
Exactly.
It'd probably be expensive to manufacture.
People out there that's it's a breakthrough, right? Just the right dots connecting the puzzle pieces.
Weird equipment for weird science, man. I mean, the entire idea of trying to simulate an element or a composition or some kind of mixture and make it act like what it's losing weight, like its inertia has changed. Just getting these physical effects out of materials like that is something nobody is really looking into in the mainstream. I can promise you aerospace companies are, but other than them, and they're never going to talk about it because that's probably your most valuable secret of tech. And I'm sure some values of the military are, but in this case, like, where is it in the private sector? Who's really broadcasting? How are we doing these experiments? Like, who's building a ridiculous freaking 17 or 18 LED chain?
Jeremiah is 222 years old, and Gerald is, I'm not exactly sure, but it's his birthday today, so happy birthday, Gerald. And we just hit 3 hours, 33 minutes, 22 seconds, and now hitting 33 seconds. 3 hours, 33 minutes, 33 seconds. Happy birthday, Gerald. We're going to be
three.
Oh, and you have the Master Builder 33, born at 303 on. Whoop, whoop. Illuminati confirmed.
Continues. Illuminati confirmed.
I wonder if I can use Peltier junctions to like do a digital wavelength shift. That would be really freaking cool. I could make that whole damn thing electronic.
RJ is Illuminati confirmed. 33
RJ,
years
are you a Master Builder too?
I only ever made it to the first degree, or I never made it past the first degree.
No. When I reference that, hold on a second.
The door and he was like, I'm out of here.
Hold on a second, guys. I'm not a Mason. That's not what that means. If you've heard of numerology. No, if
I
you
got blackballed and booted for not paying my dues. I'm in Mason arrears.
Oh yeah, they want you to pay. It's like Taekwondo, but they say for your like Taekwondo for your soul, right? And it's like you got to pay your dues if you want that next level.
I'm willing to, be good at self-defense, but I don't want to be that kind of master builder. There's something in, if you guys have numerology, you take your birth date, and it's like supposed to be your life path number. And some people are Master Builder 11s, Master Builder 22s, or 33. So that's what that is. So it's just like, it's like that. Remember, Liminal, you were saying I was mentioning one day in the chat, and you're like, what's your Myers-Briggs? I was talking about, it's like a different, but it's like kind of related to astrology. It's related to your Vedic chart.
I'm sorry, could you say that one more time? It's
one
related
time you
to.
And I were talking, we were talking in chat. I was talking about like different types of there's the astrology, right, of your personality. There's the really super basic one, which most people don't connect with. But then there's something called Vedic. There's something called a Jovian, and then there's like numerology. And then I was just saying,
Jovian gets really weird.
Yeah, it does.
It got surprisingly weird for me. I was like, what is this? And then I looked into it a little bit more, and I'm still going to say it's weird in the sense that it seems just as cobbled together and as convoluted as complex astrology does, and it, many systems, they can all kind of reveal and reflect something back to you. It's weird stuff. But what system are you talking about?
What number am I talking about? Is that what you said? Sorry?
Oh, you were saying that we had been previously talking about some system.
Oh, the Myers-Briggs.
The Myers-Briggs is like the most well-renowned typology test.
The only scrutiny I would put on it, because I felt this way when I retook it, because I actually realized that when I first took it, I came out as an INT. Shoot, I'm going to mess it up. I know I'm like JP or something.
You're INTJ or P, J or P at the end. Yeah.
Hold on, I can pull it up because I totally saved it. Anyway.
I think I know what you're getting at. Here's the thing.
And then I retook it.
Many people will, if they go through changes, significant behavioral and personality changes, you will score differently, or it might be indicative of, I don't want to say it might be indicative of having a personality that is always changing, which may be a sign that you want to get something checked out.
And Liminal, like the CIA talks about that there's like multiple versions of these in a sense. And I think it might be because we probably all have a little bit of like a multiple personality kind of thing.
Right.
Not to the full extent of, maybe being diagnosed, but well, I
was
mean,
gonna say, like, if over a 10-year period in your 20s, like for me, I was an ENFP all the way, and I just thought that was
me, myself, and I all exist within BurnEye.
I thought that was what I was going to be.
You're right.
Going into my 30s, I turned into an INTP. So there you go.
That's interesting. So like, I'm pretty sure I was an INFJ when I first took it, and now I'm an ENFJ. But I think that was because I was depressed when I first took it. I was going through a lot of depression.
That makes sense.
And so I'm wondering if that's why, right? Because I was way more introverted. I mean, I still can be. That's the thing is that some people
have more consistent circumstances or more fixed personalities, and they're going to reliably over the course of their life score as one or two types that are very closely related. Or you might find that as you go from your youth and to your your adulthood, that type changes, and that's actually not unusual. A good way to see if it's like fairly stable is just like over a several year period, you can test yourself a few times and see where you're at.
What's kind of cool for me is that this actually they call ENFJ the teacher, and that actually connects to my master builder. It's supposed to be I'm an educator, and my Jovian is I'm a master generator, which is I think it's all connecting to me being like an educator. Which is funny because my job in clinical.
I know I have my Jovian saved somewhere from way back when. I can't even remember what mine is. I'm probably not a master builder though. I'm one of those people that's meant to bump into things and find out what doesn't work, so I can tell people what does work.
I'll agree with that.
I think I am good chaos. I'm the bull in the china shop, and I'm the triple horns. I was born the year of the ox. I have both Aries and Taurus in my sun and moon. It's like triple horns. It's good. You got a good chaos is important. That's the thing. Like I think. Some people were like, oh, they're disrupting things and they ask too many questions, right? I'm the person that asks too many questions. And so like you get a little annoying sometimes. Well, I did to people. I'm not saying you do. And so, cause you've never annoyed me.
Well, there are times.
Okay, calm down. Just kidding. Anyway.
Don't worry, I love
it. So anyway, it's good. I think people need to be more good chaos, and that's what shakes things up. It's what gets people to potentially see, another way, and it may be a form of healing.
I agree, and if you go far enough, everything meets up. Not to generalize, but it really does overlap. If you're into optics, you're going to get into chemistry and gases, and if you're coming from the agricultural side, you can end up doing electroculture, and then I was growing crystals a couple months ago, and now I'm doing electroculture, and 2 years ago I was studying electrical engineering and all kinds of stuff. Cool. I mean, throughout the course of my life I've been through so many different things, so we are multifaceted individuals coming together and trying to figure this out.
That's so funny because I've been called jack of all trades. I dabble in a lot of different things.
Jack of all trades, master of some. Okay.
Oh, I like that way better than master of none.
Yeah.
Well, and now we can actually tie it back to that comment earlier. Being polymaths, you're sharing and basically diving into a whole lot of different things and becoming really good at them. This is why it's so important to learn that focus I was talking about earlier. Because if you just focus on one thing at a time and become proficiently good at it, then you can basically use that at any point, and now you've learned another skill without having this divided attention and broken memory to try and figure out what the heck it was that you did that worked so well.
That's actually so true, because like I'll open something because it's my ADHD again, and all of a sudden I'm realizing I'm looking at something that had nothing to do with what I sat down to work on, and I will have to refocus. And something that's helped me is organizing. I have like a planner that like lets me write down goals and things like things that I've achieved. So it's actually like I forget what they call those, but there's another type of, what's that thing called? But it's like neurographica, if you guys have heard of it. It's there's another name for it too, because Calistoga Refried, Kevin, who used to be on here, he worked with a teacher, like sort of this famous teacher, and it's a way to like reprocess or to help with your memory. And so it's like you draw like a circular map of like, so maybe you put your main goal in the center, and then you branch off on like what you need to do to get to that point. And so but neurographica is actually where you are sort of drawing these random designs, really, and you're doing it while you're reading or processing data, and it allows your brain to withhold the memories differently than.
Are you talking about actually? This is an actual technique people are drawing while reading or doing some other activity.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I don't think this is the answer for everybody, but sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, it's kind of like a the way I look at that is that's a distraction for the conscious mind to allow the subconscious mind to express itself through the body. And for some people, it depends. That could be a way to tap into automatic drawing or automatic writing. I know that's getting a bit into woo territory, but I really think it's primarily a way that would help one tap into their subconscious.
They're stating that it is forming new neural connections, and I haven't looked into if there is actual data behind that statement.
Okay, so they think it's a good way to.
Yeah, I'll do more research on it.
So, are they allowing is it like an intuitive allow the drawing to happen, or are they actually trying to draw something while reading something? Is it both deliberate on both ends?
I don't believe it's deliberate on both ends. Okay. I believe it's supposed to be a flow on the drawing end.
Okay. Yeah.
You want me to read this?
That definitely sounds more like a subconscious outlet on the drawing end with the body.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. What you said.
I would say I've seen this before, actually, and this is one of those things that there's a TED Talk about it, about people who have the like super memorization capability and the ways that you program your memory. So anytime you have more than one stimulus simultaneously occurring in the brain, as you're reading or digesting some information, and you have a secondary stimulus, which could be audio, like some people love to read audiobooks as they listen to them at the same time. They'll read the book and simultaneously listen to it. It creates a really, really strong link because you have these two different senses. But the most powerful sense in humans, unless the nervous system is damaged and someone has had to adapt, is the sense of touch. And this is one that immediately goes straight into the memory because it's the body, the physical body, that keeps you alive. And so there's an innate direct path through the brain to the physical kinesthetic senses. And so when you do something physical like draw, or if say you're driving or there's something else, there's some other kind of stimulus, some other vibration or some other input, or temperature or pressure or anything on your skin that's going to stimulate that input, it's going to be memorized very, very well. And that's basically what you're doing.
What about that ice water technique where you put your hand while you're like in the process of measure? I just remembered this, and you put it in cold water while you're memorizing something. This is connecting, correct?
Yeah, it sounds like if you've already worn out your ability to use those other distractions to focus, that maybe you could do something more extreme. But like, quite honestly, I've seen plenty of evidence towards very gentle stimulus. Like what you're doing there with simply drawing is an output And you might think it'd be a major distraction, but honestly, it's just, you're not really drawing anything. That's the whole thing, is you're just allowing your hand to move and sort of sketching blindly is one of the techniques that's used. It's not about creating anything at all. You're going to end up with a jarbled mess on a single piece of paper. But the whole motion part, that's it triggers other parts of the brain that are going to automatically form those connections. We've seen this in mice too. Extensive studies have shown that mice that will run a maze during their wakeful state will then rerun that maze verbatim and do variations after the first initial run in their dream state. So they've identified that the dream state is purposed towards reliving the daily experiences and then re-simulating them with various conditions.
Yeah. That made me think of that the mushroom that, you know, restructured the Japanese subway. You heard that story? And they did
it was it was a slime mold. Slime molds are extremely good at finding the most efficient, shortest path between A and B to transfer nutrients. Oh, it's pretty awesome. Yeah, nature always has a better way to do things, and our best abilities. I was watching this amazing little YouTube suggestion called Micro Mouse competition. Veritasium just recently did a video on it. And these Micro Mouse competition uses these tiny little mouse-sized robots. They've gotten them as small as the actual house mice now. And they are so unfreaking believably fast and so absolutely precise. These tiny little robots, they can run this entire maze that's probably 15, 20, 30 meters in some case in like a matter of less than 10 seconds. When they're zipping around the corners, you're looking at the camera view, and even at 1080p, it's hard to track them because they're moving so quickly. And so basically there have been a few categories where we've gotten robotics to be as good at one specific thing as a natural thing found by creation and progression of a genetic species. Like mice, for example, are very, very good at running fast and leaping and doing all kinds of stuff. Well, we've gotten there with robotics now in that one category, but for the most part, nature always does it better. And if we look to nature to find the solution, it's guaranteed that whatever it's doing, it's already figured out how to do it most efficiently. And if we want to be effective and efficient, we've just got to find a natural process that's pretty close to the thing we want to synthesize. Quick mention of Alexander Shulgin, who did exactly that, looked at natural neurochemicals, and then found ways to create synthetic molecules that fit right into the receptors. Man, that guy was a genius.
Truly a genius in the world of psychoactive chemistry.
Yeah.
Unmute, Bernie. What you got there?
Just some of my more recent monoatomic harvesting. Zinc, silver, copper in this one. Silver, copper, zinc as well in this one. It's exact same metals, two different colors.
They really do look a lot different. Were there any differences? I mean, what was the difference between why one stayed white and the other one turned this kind of purplish?
Just later on in the reaction, in the transmutational state of decay on the anode side of the production of the metamaterials.
Was one done far before the other in terms of?
Yes, the pure white monoatomic is always just at the very beginning of the reaction, and then it keeps breaking down first to the blue diatomic oxidized, and then into the green, from blue, green, yellow, red, or orange, red, pink, and also sometimes black, and then also sometimes back to the white, what they call a calcified state as well.
One of the things we want to use those many color LEDs for is trying to test monoatomics and looking for that photonic response. I know there's got to be a wavelength in there somewhere that gets them to do something interesting.
So this picture right here, you can see this copper and aluminum foil coil, anode going into the reaction, just the salt water there, and then instantly turning that red maroonish color. And that's what I eventually dried out. And when it was dry and I rubbed my fingers together with it onto the what remained of the regular aluminum and copper, it instantly spontaneously combusted and caught fire.
No way.
Yeah,
Seriously,
yes,
like
100%.
it caught fire.
That did happen.
Do you have any of it left?
And I am sticking to it.
Dude, I need all the details of this now. If that's literally what happened, then that's the first time anybody has reported Hudson-like effects so far, because we have all tried for them. Everything from microwaving them, to flame torching them, to electrocuting the crap out of them, discharging capacitors across them, and they all seem fairly non-responsive. But you did something that you actually got a reaction out of, you've got to tell me everything. Enough to replicate it.
Exactly. I want to replicate it again first.
Please get closer to your mic.
Sulfur state. Everything comes out in this on this yellow side when you have a double negative going in. The different layers, exclusion zones and stuff.
Can you get a little closer to your mic?
No, I cannot. I'm gonna mumble in the corner, Jeremiah. Sorry. Here's the copper solenoid little Keshi pain pen, but it's just 3 copper coils in a series of 9 going counterclockwise, and then the copper oxide blue cluster there, and then there's the brownish orangish copper CuH3, I believe Keshi says, so copper trioxide hydride. I need to up my chemistry lessons again. And yeah, you can see all the bubbles and the mist actually rising off of it at the same time, simultaneously on that one, producing hydrogen or possibly HHO. Here's that same reaction that was all in that yellow sulfur state, now in the blue teal oxidized state. Nothing chemically had changed at all in this. This is a combination of a bunch of aluminum, foil, as well as copper and silver.
So in the one that when you rub your fingers together, the stuff caught fire, which I really got to hear more about that
Here
story.
you can see again on the anode side more of this red aluminum copper stuff forming on the outside. That exact same stuff that you are asking about, Jeremiah. And this is what the Alchemist state is, the red mercury state of transmutational metals, as Sir Isaac Newton also describes it. And they say that is its reactive live state.
And so what's the other electrode then? Does it need to be something specific?
Right here you can see that is a 1 ounce silver coin as the cathode.
Okay, so have you ever tried this with anything other than silver for the cathode?
Yeah, with just aluminum on aluminum, copper on copper, zinc on zinc, I get it all into that red state.
But is that red state always combustible when you dry it out?
I haven't tried it, I'm not sure.
Would you?
Yeah, we got to do a lot more experiments on it, of course. So here's a bunch of different reactors, coils, and wands and whatnot that I made back in the day. Some of them. Oh, here's this little guy where it's a couple silver ounces, maggrav coil, capacitor, and then like essentially battery of aluminum, copper, monatomic
and wax paper separating. And yeah, I gotta do more with the circuitry. Ooh, I do have this one opened up. So that right there, that's when it was first sealed, and then this is the jar now, where it's completely encased in a layer of blue crystallized silver oxide. That is this nano lattice crystallized layer that forms. And I'm sure these are actually a metamaterial because they do flake off the jar, and they're like this perfect like nano film layer.
I was thinking the exact same words, man.
Metamaterials, right? And that you see it's forming in. It can be formed in all the different states of the transmutational metals as well when built in these correct circuits and little reactor group things that I make. For instance, like this guy that's still bubbling, there's another Magrav coil that it's connected to with two copper wires connecting into the monoatomics, and that's creating the charge and differential that's powering it non-stop, even when there's not electricity connected to it. And you can see that giant arse
Structure of tubes.
Structure, yeah, that's formed there. And then when it does connect to the bottom and ground itself out, then the coils themselves, or the cathode side, oops, wrong camera, there we go. On the cathode side here, it stops producing as much hydrogen, it stops bubbling nearly as much as what it was, because the anode side has built these structures down and grounded itself to the base monoatomic amount. But it's still bubbling a little bit, but it's almost as little or as much as the one that has zero electricity to it, this Lion Magrav reactor hybrid thing that I got going on in there, where you have it producing the same amount of hydrogen through electrolysis as no electricity, as 5 volts going in, and that I can disconnect it and this thing will continue producing that same amount of hydrogen indefinitely, what seems like 9 months now on the outside ones.
So for that one that made that crazy material, was that with the silver coin? Or was that the with the aluminum on the aluminum?
Okay, so this red stuff, Jeremiah, I'm telling you, I make it out of every single metal. I've gotten it from just like copper on copper into that straight red state.
Right,
Aluminum,
but you
aluminum.
don't know if it has that property though. That's the thing.
Yes. Oh, yes. That's so sorry. Yes. And so here's some of this red stuff in this state, and that it's just made out of copper in this one.
Yeah, I really want to replicate that, and that's why I'm asking for specifics. I'm going to do exactly that.
This is the first time I've talked about it publicly. All right, so I bring my different secrets forward and discoveries forward time to time. That all right, we're bringing it to light today, I guess. Take note. 4:01 in with 41 people watching, apparently.
I'm taking note.
9:46 a.m. Dear goodness. All right, so on that note, we're going back to watch the rest of this right here first.
Hey, what about revealing all those secrets? I just wanted to know what the other
it'll
material
come.
was.
It will come, but I gotta be true to the name of the title and finish this lecture because we need to get on to the one afterwards, which is going to blow your mind even more so.
Oh man!
I promise you, it's gonna blow your mind. Well, the Wilian Donovan
one. Before we do that, let me just cover this one last thing.
All right, of course.
So this is.
I have no idea. I
was gonna show you guys the other day the what the heck?
Ooh.
Oh, I see it. Okay. Sorry, this is the light box for the Frandy Aquino photon gas experiment, and I have an analog wooden balance that's called a razor blade edge balance, and it has a razor blade sitting above it with the scale balance just slightly below it gravitationally. So if the weight changes between the left side and the right side, it won't be an electronic measurement error. It'll literally move the thing. And so inside that box are 2 LED strips, and I'm going to go show them up close. So yeah, anyways, that's it. People wanted to see the other day the photon gas layout and how I'm testing Frandy Aquino's experiment. So on the top and bottom of that plastic container that the LED strips are mounted on the side of, I can apply a ELF voltage across those, just acting like an open air capacitor. Now ideally it's tested in vacuum, but he says this can still be done with LEDs in open air, so we're going to give this a try using some of the worst LEDs for this experiment because they're super wideband kind of white noise output. They're phosphor LEDs with multi-phosphor coatings. So lots and lots of wavelengths all at once. They're cool white. And see if we can get some kind of motion. Now, I did get some motion out of the scale earlier, but I wasn't sure if it was thermal or if it was gravitational. And I haven't ruled that out yet with the digital scale. And those are coming. This is the photon gas experimental setup replication from Frandy Aquino's paper, Quantum Controller of Gravitational Force Using a Photon Gas. Yeah. And I'll let you know how it works out. So that's the last thing I had to show. We can get back to the video then.
All right. Thank you, Jeremiah. And we shall get back to this video right here. Dan Winters, Cognos 2013. Free Energy, Implosion, and New Technologies. 1 Decade in Remix.
The symmetry is doing this. And the gold atom makes an electric field when it's white gold powder that produces gravity. White gold powder has been known to float. And your ancestors were eating the gold, the white gold powder, because they thought it would make them immortal, actually. That's how it became known as Holy Communion. And it was served, by the way, in a pine cone shaped wafer that you can see the carvings at Rennes-le-Château in France of the white gold powder. So Lawrence Gardner, in his book Sacred Arc, is analyzing the electric field, and he decided that because the electric field of the monoatomic gold is so huge, it makes an almost infinite electric field. And it's called, by the way, the same thing. It's called phase conjugate dielectric. And because that electric field is so big, so perfect, so distributed like a rose. You know the Rose of Sharon in the Jewish tradition? Well, it turns out that in the Hebrew tradition, the name for heaven is called the Plains of Sharon. The Plains of Sharon. And according to his very, very scholarly analysis, the electric definition of the Plains of Sharon, an example of that is a perfectly unpacked electron. So, when I go to heaven, I'm going to be a perfectly unpacked electron. Doesn't that sound delightful? It's another way of saying to become a wave that's perfectly distributed. In English, the word for heaven comes from He Ave, heaven. He Ave, heaven. He means the breath of charge. Ave means to take flight, to take wing. Ave, to fly. Avion, par avion, sounds Spanish to me. So, hey ave, where the breath of charge takes flight, where charge can fly, right? Remember how angry the Hopi grandfathers were when the US government decided to put steel pipes in the old Aribi, the sacred burial ground of the Hopi. Why were the Hopi so angry that the US government decided to put steel pipes, sewage, across the sacred burial ground? What did the Hopi ancestor know that the US government did not know? The Hopi ancestor knew that the circulation of charge in that burial ground was fractal, phase conjugate, like a rose. And the only way ancestors live in memory is if that charge remains in circulation. Yes. And steel pipes and steel buildings and aluminum and electrosmog, these are poisonous to the distribution of all living plasma, all living memory, for the very simple reason that the electric field that goes, the electric field you call life, which I call phase conjugate, L-I phi, life, life. The electric field you call life has to unpack like a rose. What does that mean in practice? It means you go to your bed, your house, your garden, and your city, and you rearrange the magnetic lines to look like a rose. The magnetic map of Prague originally is a rose. It's a meteor caldera. And when we get to Prague, Valerie noticed that we were lucid dreaming more. Why could we lucid dream better in Prague? The magnetic map is a rose. Oh, by the way, Prague is successful at attracting life force, tourists, energy, and money. So you could tell the Spanish government, if they want money back in Spain, rearrange the magnetic map to be attracting charge. Because the circulation of living charge is the human energy for which money is the only symbol. Right? So, this ability to make magnetism circulate successfully translates into very practical suggestions for your day-to-day life. Have you been to Switzerland in the mountains where you have the old-fashioned house? It's made of clay and natural materials and straw, all living biologic materials. And in many of those houses, there's a hole in the roof that points in the direction of a certain star. And they say, that's where grandmother goes out when she dies. Yeah? Same where the tube that points to Sirius from the Great Pyramid. Same principle. Now, you know, in Australia, I think they found out that houses with metal roof, you can't dream as well. Why does a steel or metal over your head reduce your ability to dream? You know? Well, we have some clues. In Australia, where the Aboriginals, let's see, we'll use this one. they found out that the place the Aboriginals called dreaming track or songline in Australia is actually measurable as a magnetic line. So that the ability to, let's see, I think it's in here, phase contour. So they were studying what were called song lines in the Australian Aboriginal tradition. Got to find that picture now. Here it is. It's from our friend Rob Gourlay in Australia. These are the white lines here in white are the song line, the dreaming track. And the way the electrical engineers measure song line or dreaming track here in white, they do it from airplane and satellite magnetic flux permissivity, which is simply where rivers of magnetism are flowing in the land, magnetic conductivity, like the white lines, accurately identify what Aboriginals called dreaming track or song line. So what's the physics? Why would you need a magnetic river for propagating your dreaming? Does anybody have a clue? Another prediction that spiritual scientists always say is that if you can lucid dream, you will take memory with you when you die. But if you cannot lucid dream, you will take less memory with you when you die. So lucid dreaming has something to do with memory, coherence of plasma. In Egyptian, the term for that is the origin of the term Catholic and Cathar. It was called your Ka in Egypt, K-A, which means your boat into the underworld. So if you get a coherent aura, then your plasma, your charge, can take wings, hey ave, to fly, and your magnetic plasma can go down the river, the river of magnetic conduction. Now, if the magnetic map of your bed and your house look like a rose, imagine how easy it is for birth and death and dreaming. Whereas if the magnetic map of your bed is a steel and aluminum building full of dead air and electro smog, I tell you, you have a problem. It's the life force in the air itself that allows the charge to propagate. Hey ave, plains of Sharon. Your breath of charge takes wings. I feel like I'm in heaven now. Do you see the principle? So this is just an introduction to the curriculum of living architecture and the alchemy of the flame in the mind. Let's see, what time is it? It's 6 o'clock. Before we go further, can we do questions here? Would anyone want to ask questions? Should we have some dialogue? Spontaneity? Anyone? Not ready for that. Well, if you have questions, feel free. The climax of this lecture is going to be about applying this to technology, to sacred space, to living agriculture, to living architecture. And I'm going to show you a presentation which is called the Fractal Field Team here, which has examples of things we're doing to create sacred space in practical terms. These are the websites, fractalfield.com, breakthroughtechnologies.com, theimploder.com, purify.com. And Breakthrough Technologies and also bloomthedesert.com, those two websites are in conjunction with Roger Green, who is here with us, who works on all these projects with us, and he's currently also involved in the fusion work. And he's happy to talk to you about eco-global fuels and about some of the Rossi work, the ECAT. So this is just an introduction to some of the things we're doing with the Bloom the Desert program. The Bloom the Desert project includes ORMEs, the gold powder for agriculture purposes, and it includes the imploder, which I'm going to show you in a minute. It also includes the study of primary water, which is deep rock water, which is more alive because it has more charge, yeah? It's also called a captive water table. This is a project we did in Australia to bring the water back to this land at Eagle Farm, the Tiagra airport near Byron Bay, and we remapped these dolmen to put this pent magnetic symmetry into the magnetic field of this place. See that pentagram in the center, and the magnetic map increased in charge density. So we actually fabricated the kind of stone dolmen circle that measurably affect seed germination. This is the Purify project. This gold capacitive structure creates lots of charge in the body, affects seed germination, can be used to charge rock powders. Here we're charging a rock powder with a gold 5-sided implosion pyramid. The angle of that cone is exactly this angle here in the center. If you stellate a dodeca, you make the exact 60-degree cone that becomes charge implosion. And later you're going to see that in the imploder for water for agriculture. So this is the Purify. And here we're using the same principle to charge the yeast, the brewer's yeast, and we accelerate metabolism in the yeast 40 to 50% simply by adding a 0-power capacitor. We're proving here that we can do the same thing with capacitance charge, a cup-shaped implosive egg-like condenser. Condense, capacitance, charge compression. There's a little pine cone shape there in the electric field where you feel a little cool breeze. So the same principle is the reason Stonehenge causes seeds to grow, and the reason the Prairie device eliminated cancer, because all of life requires a centripetal field, implosion force. The electric difference between a live seed and a dead seed is quite simple. A live seed can suck in charge. That's why it's alive. A dead seed has no implosion, cannot attract charge, is not fractal, and that's why it's dead. So knowing this is life or death for you. How do you keep your aura together? Get centripetal or get dead. This is a centripetal device. This is the shungite. It's a natural phase conjugate dielectric, almost like the Philosopher's Stone John Dee and Kelly used for alchemy. The moldavite and the shungite are examples of phase conjugate dielectrics, which is to say, imploding capacitors. How romantic. Next time you want to ask your lover for a kiss, you tell her that I'm an imploding capacitor. I'm sure she will be attracted. Right. This is another imploding capacitor here. This is in Barcelona. I don't know if it was the last conference we did, but everyone felt the charge. This is called Ecosify, and this is all gold. So I guess this might be more expensive than a Volkswagen because there's so much gold in there. But the demonstrated principle is that you make a capacitor that implodes, and you make a flame in the mind, right? So that's the geometry. You see how the geometry looks like a flame? You see the flame there? Let's play the animation of that flame here. Now do you see why we call it a flame in the mind? Let's play the animation. Here's, on the bottom left, here it is. Let's stop this here. Wait, I'll control this. This is not something Bill Gates can do, but Steve Jobs can do it. You can control Keynote better than PowerPoint. Right here, I'm doing it. Bill Gates, eat your heart out. No. So all right. An apple looks like a donut, right? So, but you see, the point is that right here, right there, do you see a flame? Does that look like a flame to you? That's a flame in the mind, a fire, a plasma fusion event. Do you see why that's attractive? That is a flame. And that is the way flame is created. You know what? I had my first bliss experiences in the Gurdjieff School, studying sacred gymnastics of Gurdjieff in Charlestown, West Virginia, at claymont.org. And our teacher of sacred gymnastics, a French powerful spiritual teacher named Pierre Elliott, it turns out that our teacher for the sacred gymnastic, his university career was studying the physics of flame. So if you know how to make a flame, you can make fire in the mind, and you can make human bliss, and you can design sacred gymnastics, and you can make architecture, and you can cause seeds to germinate, and you can make plasma fusion containment. It's all the same geometry. Now, I want to show you one more picture. Remember when we said, that here are the waves, here are the longitudinal waves coming in like this, causing compression in your mind, right? And you got implosion in the center. And we said that's like phase conjugate optics, same thing, 4 waves mixing. But you would say, hey, that looks like a cube. That doesn't look like a dodecahedron, right? That's a cube. But here is the cube. I'm going to control this cube here. Here's the cube. Here is from the Star Mother. Here's how that cube gets in a dodecahedron. There's the cube. And now that cube is nested in a dodeca, right there. See the cube in the dodeca? And now, this is called embedding. And the ratio of the edge of that cube, 1.0, to the edge of that dodecahedron, 0.618. Golden mean, right? And now I'm going to do perfect nesting or perfect embedding, which is to extend the charge from each vertex of the dodeca and that's the yellow icosahedron in the Star Mother. So now here's cube, dodeca, icosa. Just extend the wave straight out, icosa. And now I extend that straight out again, also by golden ratio, compression. Oh, there it is. Extending just straight. Every edge extended straight by golden ratio. Hello. Does that look familiar? That's the star mother. That's perfect nesting. That's the geometry of DNA Earth grid and zodiac. So you see that if you get the cube perfect, then you can embed from hex to pent into golden ratio dodeca. And that's the geometry that creates fusion, implosion, fire in the mind. You know, these plasma fields, I was going to tell you the story of fusion in the blood. We didn't finish that story. See, when the DNA turns inside out and becomes a torus like this, remember when we said that ball lightning causes telepathy? Because the plasma at the center becomes part of what I call DNA radio. DNA radio. The physics of telepathy. So whether it's ball lightning or DNA experiencing human bliss because of braiding, it ignites the fire in the blood. This is our favorite joke. We call this principle in physics is called, come on baby, light my fire. So when the fire is ignited in your DNA with the physics of bliss, then that ignites DNA radio. This is fusion in the blood. Well, I suppose we need to finish today's lecture with an ET story. Is it okay if we finish with an ET story? Is that okay with you? ET? ET, phone home. Okay, we're going to finish the story with ET. It is my humble opinion that the guy called Yahweh, Jehovah, in the Jewish tradition is probably the Anunnaki called Enlil. And Sitchin and others believe that. And Yahweh, Jehovah, taught that kosher required that the blood must be out of the meat before you eat it, right? Now, they also taught that the Anunnaki were dying prematurely when they arrived on Earth because they couldn't handle the atmosphere. Now, we believe that the actual story of the Anunnaki is a story of what we call the Ages of Uras, U-R-A-S. The Ages of Uras is a story told by Anton Parks in the Chronicles of Girku. And they said that Enlil's brother, Enki, looked like this, a frog. And the website is Zeitlin.net about the Ages of Uras. And he says that that culture, this Ur culture, and I want to show you the picture of the history of that term Ur. I'm doing this for a reason. Here is the Ur-An culture. Ur became An-Ur, Ungary, Ural, Uruk, Ibi-Uru, Nibiru. I don't think the translator has a job here because these words are all self-explanatory. They're the roots of the term Uru, as in Heb-Uru, Ein Sof Ur, Ursprung, Uruk, Iraq. You see the term you are. Now, if you were studying the history of the planet and you saw this term Uras, you are you, in so many words in your language, would not you believe that in order to know the history of where we come from, we need to know who was Uru? I think, given the fact that Jerusalem, Uru Asa Elem, is a place where Uru, which Uru I believe means of the ancient dragon blood, Uru Asa LM, Jerusalem. That's right, it's down here. Mi Uru, ancient dragon blood, Asa, queen of, El, phase shift. So where the queen of the ancient dragon blood made the phase shift. Uru Asa LM, Jerusalem. Probably we would not need a war over Jerusalem if we knew what it was for. A place where dragon blood can make the phase shift. So who's this dragon blood, and what was the fire in their blood? Later, with help from Bill, we wrote a paper, and you can read the paper at fusionintheheart.com, about fusion in the blood. And specifically, we were studying the blood of our ancestors, the Anunnaki, the Uru, the Draco. We believe their roots were in Alpha Draconis, and whether you believe that or not is not important, but the chemistry of their blood is instructive. You see, our ancestors, sometimes you call them the Nephilim, fallen Draco, Anunnaki, Sumerian, whatever you call them, origins of Hungarian Draco. The chemistry lesson remains important, whatever you call them. The chemistry lesson is, from their star system, their blood was lipid-based. Lipid, L-I-P-I-D. It was an oil, lipid-based blood. And for them, they were nitrogen breathing. It's called the plague of Azoth, the plague of nitrogen. And for them, oxygen was a poison. The wars they came from in Orion were called the Oxygen Wars for a reason. It's the basis of the movie Total Recall about the Oxygen Wars. It's those who want high oxygen versus those who want low oxygen. And if your blood chemistry is poisoned by oxygen, then obviously you don't want high oxygen. Also, for their lipid-based nitrogen-breathing blood, that the water in the blood of meat would be a poison to them. So the origin of the kosher in the Jewish tradition requires understanding Draco blood to understand where it came from. Did you know that on Alpha Draconis, the men and the women have a separate language called Emesa and Emisa? Eminase? Anton Parks describes in detail. And exactly the same is true for the Australian Aboriginals. The men and the women must have a different language by law. Do you know the rules that became the marriage law in Aboriginal Australia and caste system in India? Those rules come directly from Alpha Draconis. There's so much we need to know about our ancestors to understand ourselves. Did you know that the culture on Alpha Draconis was female dominated for a long time, and they came here with a fear of women? When I started studying in graduate school the history of Earth, I concluded the most dominant feature of the history of Earth is the fear of women. And I studied everywhere to figure out, where did the fear of women came from? But you know what I found out finally is you cannot learn the origin of the fear of women without understanding the extraterrestrial origin of our ancestors. Anunnaki, Uru, Draco. That was a female-dominated culture. Well, you can see I carry on. and this would be very controversial information, and I'm not asking that you believe this without your own investigation. I do suggest you read Anton Parks, and you should read that paper on the blood chemistry. It's fun. FusionInTheHeart.com. Thank you again to Bill on that. But here is a final point. Here's a final point. Final point I wish to make. You know when you say, "Come on, baby, light my fire," what you're talking about is passion, right? If you don't have passion, you might as well be dead, truthfully. So, we electrical engineers, we would like to understand a little bit about the nature of passion. Now, you can regard this as a fairy tale. I regard it as true history. But the story is that Enki, Ea, Samuel, when Enki selected which of the Rh negative rhesus monkey, which of the monkey blood he was going to genetically modify to make Adam and Eve, he chose a species where he saw that monkey exhibit compassion to other animals. And he had never seen compassion in his whole life before. And that's how he selected the monkey that would be fun to work with genetically. He saw passion. Now, in order to remember this story, you can make jokes at the expense of English people, if you like. You see, the greatest concentration of Rh negative blood on planet Earth is UK, United Kingdom. What does it mean to have a stiff upper lip? This is an old joke. Sorry, Valerie, my jokes are getting old. Sorry. But a stiff upper lip is when you're in the House of Lords and you have a stiff upper lip, you can't talk very well. But the physics is that when you're a little boy, if your mother, Elizabeth from Lizard Born, if your mother says, "Don't cry," to a little boy, the biophysics is it will cause your upper lip to get stiff. True physics. So the cause of a stiff upper lip is mother says, "Don't cry." It means repressed emotion. It's classic neurolinguistic programming, classic physics of emotion. So why do you have a stiff upper lip in England? Remember, we're going to make jokes about all the cultures, hopefully, but we'll just do British people for now. But the stiff upper lip means no passion, repressed emotion. What is Rh negative mean? Rh negative blood concentrated in UK means the rhesus monkey is absent. What's left? The reptilian, the Draco, right? Very intelligent, but stiff. Lack of passion. Why did they have lack of passion? Well, the rhesus monkey had passion and compassion, which Enki never saw before. The rhesus monkey blood was dominant. The reptilian blood was recessive. Very important to know. The inbreeding in the reptilians, you know, the story of the bloodlines of Europe, Holy Blood, Holy Grail. We could do the Da Vinci Code here very easily. But my point was that if your blood chemistry does not permit you to have fire or fusion in your blood, you physically do not have DNA radio, so you cannot feel other people's feelings as if they are your own. Remember that plasma fire in George Edgley's lab. Everybody around is healed. They're sucked in. It's a plasma fusion device in the sense of Holy Communion. You see what the Holy Communion is that allows me to feel you? Is if I can have that plasma fusion going on in my blood. If I don't have that plasma fusion, if I succumb to a mechanical culture, then I can't feel your feelings as if they're mine, because my blood needs to be on fire to feel the fire in your blood. And that is the physics of plasma fusion. So, you know, the end of this conference will be Bill telling you about solutions to energy from imploding technology. Bill says that every one of the devices that he is going to show you that do 0 point energy, almost all of them have one thing in common: the golden spiral and the spiral on the cone. Why? Implosive collapse. Gain energy during collapse, during fusion. So whether it's energy or architecture or physics, it all starts with one simple symmetry principle. And I promised everyone here that we would show a few pictures of how we build that into an agriculture device. This is that nozzle, that cone, in the imploder for agriculture. The same way you do fusion in the blood. I just want to do an animation of that cone, so it's so beautiful the way that cone works. Here is the architecture of the perfect implosion cone applied to agriculture. When water goes down that cone, it implodes, it gains spin density, and becomes centripetal. And we have a dramatic effect on seed germination, on growth in agriculture. So much so that that's a successful commercial product, theimploder.com. This is the geometry of that cone. Do you see where we got that cone from? This is a practical application. Restored centripetal forces. Implosion for agriculture. So there are so many products that can be designed when you understand the nature of implosion. Restored centripetal force basically is our planet returning to a more ordered state. So on that note, I urge you all to get fractal, to be like the rose, and I thank you very much. Thank you.
Right, so that finishes that first epic one. Now let's have some discussion again, and then
Now, those are some shades, Bernie. Those are some shades.
Right? It's summertime.
Cool guys.
I love the electric culture. We're getting pumped. All right. So I'm going to fill these beauties up with water again. So I guess I'll just leave it on this large screen here for a second while I turn on the hose, and we can watch these mystic monoatomic mana metamaterial Ormuses refill and swirl around.
Has anyone here ever seen that UHF movie by Weird Al Yankovic?
Oh man, that was so funny. I love that movie. I've seen it several times.
Do you remember the part where it's Kramer but that's not his name in the movie. And the kid wins the competition, and he says, "You know what little Jimmy gets? He gets to drink from the fire hose." And he just turns it on full blast.
Yeah.
Sorry, Bernie, when you said that, it just reminded me of that clip. I had to bring it up.
Oh man, yeah, dude, that whole entire movie. If you haven't seen it, you're out there listening. If you have not seen,
UHF by Weird Al Yankovic, yeah.
So funny, such a weird, trippy kind of out there.
It's all comedy and it's different.
It's different, right?
I'm still just taking a moment to reabsorb my brain. So sorry, guys, just catching up.
I actually just stuck a little transformer in the oven. I'm not actually sure what the heck it's from. It's a very high winding ratio, high voltage transformer. It could have been from a very old type of printer, but I think it's set to be about 1,000 volts output, which is exactly what I need to charge this 1,000 volt capacitor for MOSFET triggering on an electronic pulse generator that will do like a 60,000 volt pulse and in a very short rise time. So yeah, just toss that sucker in the oven, and now I'm trying to melt the wax off so I can unwind some of the primary turns and put my own coil on there. And then we're going to run that thing in a little handheld voltage multiplier type of pulse supply to drive the whole darn thing. It's going to be awesome.
Sounds like fun.
Oh yeah, it's already jacking out like two-inch long sparks, and it snaps nice and loud. I mean, I would not want to get hit with it, I'll tell you that. It's dumping like a 3.5, when I'm done with it, 3.5 microfarad, 1,200 volt capacitor into this transformer every single time. And the transformer is kind of a beast.
Yeah, that sounds like a beast.
I want to try to PWM that damn thing so I can do true T.T. Brown experiments. In his original paper, How I Control Gravitation, there's a picture of the high voltage gravitator, quote unquote, system hooked up, which is basically a really long rod built out of layers of litharge, wax, a special type of fabric to absorb the wax and kind of hold the litharge onto one side, which he makes act like sort of a electron transmission layer, and then the plates sandwiching that together, and then he sort of separates these things by just bakelite or by wax with nothing in it. And with that assembly, yeah, he shows the transformer. There's a pulse transformer that does like 100 kV pulse hooked up to that device that's already DC biased. And even though he doesn't show diodes, you can assume he's probably running the pulse transformer with something like a Class A input to get a biased DC type of charging effect. Or he may even just have such a low frequency on a big transformer that he disconnects the wire from the transformer so it doesn't discharge the whole entire unit. Either way, though, I think it can be explained by electron migration in the dielectrics, jumping from one heavy particle to the other and changing the nuclear spin value, gaining a relativistic inertial effect because it's some of the electron momentum in the direction of the anode is actually being converted into nuclear magnetic moment spin. In the lead, mainly, in the litharge, and on the plates.
I want to see what those kind of pulses look like once you get the sucker working.
Kind of like an ignition coil on steroids, really.
Yeah. Large amounts of steroids.
Oh, yeah. It's a full loop core ferrite, and the system is designed. The transformer I'm using is designed for like 600 watts. It certainly cracks a nice arc across the terminals, and now it'll crack a really nice impulse. I mean, it's to the point where dielectric barrier discharge-wise, if you put a separator like glass or plastic or anything between the two terminals, you'll see lightning shoot over the entire surface and just spread out like Lichtenberg style onto the surface, trying to get across through the other side and charging up the dielectric just to kind of transmit that electron charge until it decays. And with high-speed diodes, which will be added, we get a truly monopolar pulse.
That would be
Physics
awesome.
doesn't like monopolar pulses, by the way. That's where you get your weird scalar crap going on. That's part of the Hutchinson effect.
I want to see that. That'll be awesome.
I'll show it off for sure. There's got to be a way to rip the charges out. And so in terms of generating exotic vacuum objects and then pulling them through, I would definitely go for a pulse generator in most applications, because inside the vacuum chamber with Vega to generate EVOs, he's got to pump a significant amount of energy into that thing, pull a pretty hard vacuum, harder than what you're going to get with your average 2-vane vacuum pump. It'll be near the max just to pull it close enough. And like my little vacuum pump doesn't go deep enough for that. So instead, what I can do is discharge capacitors into it. So no steady state DC, but just discharge. And then I can still generate the electromotive force necessary between the electrodes to rip charges out and force them into a magnetic beam current, much like a, what do they call that? The conduits, the plasma conduits that will rise up the surface of the planet. I'm trying to remember what those are called again now. Nanosphrasia.
Oh, which?
I said nanosphrasia. That's what they call it when you can't remember a word.
Yeah, you know what? I couldn't remember a word earlier this morning.
Currents. That's it. Yeah.
That's exactly what I was trying to think of this morning, and I couldn't think of them. You're talking about the currents that come in and out of certain spots in the northern part of our Earth, right? Basically,
well, they can show up just about anywhere. I mean, they'll follow events.
Really?
Hurricane currents will connect to superstorms and all kinds of stuff. Hurricane currents will connect to hurricanes. They'll extend way, way out into space, just like sprites will. And I mean, they can be way the heck up there. They generally spread out into the vacuum in sort of a vortex form, getting away from the gravitational field. And those currents can flow all the way around the magnetosphere of the Earth and be charged up as a conduit to carry high energy solar particles that are positively ionized down through the ionosphere. That creates a tremendous current flow. That's why they tend to circulate around themselves, because there's an electromotive force in the direction straight from outside the magnetosphere that's carrying these charged particles directly towards the surface. But then as they move, there's this secondary field that's rotating around those particles. So they tend to entrain in a vortex. And once that vortex is established, there's a countermotive force. So it actually is like a layered vortex of counter-rotating vortices surrounding each other.
I'm sorry to interrupt there, Jeremian. I got to dip out for like 5 minutes here. I'll be right back, okay?
Yeah, okay, man.
Okay, sorry about that.
Yeah, in a couple minutes, I go check on that transformer, see if its wax is dripping out sufficiently. Might turn up the temperature a bit. You've got to be careful with ferrites when you're baking them or heating them with anything, because the ferrite itself is quite delicate, and you don't want to heat it too quickly, and definitely not unevenly, or it'll shatter on you. Those are looking trippy, Bernie. Quiet number of colors right there. And I'll be right back as well.
There we go. Now that the water's off, look at all of those colors. And that one that had turned like bit purple and gray and separated, now it's back to the full gold yellow, the white remaining white. This originally purple, now beige, weird one doing its thing. This guy full purple still. And full purple, purple, pink, teal, blue, green.
Bright light, bright light.
Right? We're doing real science, real alchemy right here. And
That looks gorgeous.
now,
Seriously, that's awesome.
isn't it? Like, it's just It's so beautiful, those colors.
So beautiful.
And
That
then,
too.
yeah, we're going to be planting them with the same seeds in the different buckets to get these real science experiments going. And
There
then
wouldn't be
once
any
again,
difference.
here's a couple different types of that, the materials packaged within themselves, and the differential between the metals and the different states that they're in is supposed to create energy field differential and a soothing sort of energy when applied to sore muscles and stuff. And right, once again, this is like, it's not touching your physical skin or ingesting or any way. It's just a water pack.
Is there any difference if you use like a distilled water when you're filling those? Or neutralized water?
Great question. And for lots of people, yes, if your natural tap water is tainted, polluted, dirty, or anything wrong with it, you don't want to use that water because it will exponentially increase those negative ions, particles, if it gets into a monatomic form. And thus you definitely want to use that's spring water, but in my house I do have distilled water, and I would recommend everybody start out using distilled or spring water. And spring water essentially is what we've all been calling or slightly discussing, that primal water. Is that what it was?
Well, now I'm curious the difference between both, because you got so many more minerals in spring versus distilled where it pulls it all out. Sometimes there's a chemical.
Exactly. So many more experiments to do. This year we're doing all of these ones, and then next year we'll get into also testing distilled, microwave, spring, tap water, and all of that.
Yeah,
On
primary
the
is
same
different.
setup with.
Yeah, there's so much.
Primary comes deep from the earth, actually, usually from under the aquifer. So it's interesting.
Yeah, and like the different properties of like certain areas.
Yeah, and it's under pressure, and it's a different form of water, so to speak.
All
Yeah.
right. Back to everything else.
Let's do it.
Well, I'm going to break in here to break out, so to speak. I've got to get ready for a few things that are going on today. So I appreciate the live, Bertie, and talking to everybody.
WPG
Thanks for being here, Gerald.
channel. I will show the link in the live chat as soon as I am back in. And happy birthday, Gerald! It's Gerald's birthday.
Happy birthday, Gerald!
Thank you. My age
Gerald,
is now. I'm now
a little alternator demo before you left today, because it was your birthday. Weren't you supposed to do that, or?
No, I'm not fully ready to do that. But you know what? On the next Real Science, I will be.
Deal. Happy birthday.
We'll
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to Gerald. Happy birthday, WPG Enlighten for Truth 2. Happy birthday, Gerald, to you.
I'm glad I had mute, Bernie, but no, I'm just kidding. Thanks, buddy. Thanks, everybody. You guys have a great day. I'm out, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you.
Yeah, G. Good luck with everything that you've got going on there and with the craziness.
For sure, brother. I'll give you a Zoom call real soon. We got to talk.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Have a great.
You too.
All right. So we have the wonderful MindFull exposures, Esra, Exotic Propulsion, Jeremiah, Liminal, myself, and Gerald had to go because he's the birthday boy and life goes on. All right, Gerald's channel. Do I have it pulled up? Come on. No, but I do have MindFull exposures, so I'm going to show Sarah's first while I look up Gerald's channel, but here is MindFull Exposures. Any thoughts there, ladies and gentlemen?
I very much like it when he gets into the heavy technical part of the science in the lecture, and I can't really say much of his esoteric philosophy I can agree with.
Got into the deep end.
Yeah. He really got out there, and I can't really, think one way or the other, but I would say I probably more likely disagree with it if I have to push myself on one side of the scale or the other when he gets esoteric. But as far as the physical experimentation stuff, he knows how to get technical when he chooses to, and that's very awesome when he does. So
yeah, I think the blood thing was, sorry, just real quick, just the blood, when you started to get into that, I started to kind of disconnect a little bit, because I think there's way more to it, and our ability to manipulate our own DNA and all that.
Also the fear of women. I mean, I just wanted to shout
Right?
out.
You're cracking up over here, man.
Hear me roar! I'm a woman. But I wanted to be polite and let the guy finish speaking, so I
exactly right. Everything
because of like the idea that we used to, that they throw out that we were more matriarchal. I can't talk. Like in the tribe, and even in that's what he was kind of getting at. And so, like, because we've changed, because it's become, I don't know. I mean, I guess it's a far stretch for me what I'm saying, but still, I didn't resonate.
You can't trust anything that, has that.
Right? But it's the technical science that had me most excited, and even more so
really
was all of
like
his
the geometry
references to this presentation by Wilian Donovan, which I really want Jeremiah and Liminal and Sarah, all of yours inputs, because you probably haven't seen this one, and oh my god, it gets so technical, and he names so many patents as well.
Since I kind of got this going on in the background as I'm working on other projects, that is
exactly fine. And, so
yeah, listen in.
I'm gonna hit play on here for a minute and let's check it out, because it's been a while, and this one's one that stuck with me.
Give your heart, your mind, everything that you have to find out the way of living differently. But that depends on you and not somebody else. Because in this there is no teacher, no pupil, there is no leader, there is no guru, there is no master, no savior. You yourself are the teacher and the pupil, you are the master, you are the guru, you are the leader. You are everything. And to understand is to transform what is.
So I guess Dan had already told you that I'm into more the hardware aspect as far as the different free energy and anti-gravity devices, propulsion systems. And my talk is going to be free energy. It's always been with us. And it really has. Marco mentioned something about alchemy, cold fusion in the Middle Ages. That's true. I mean, it's been around for a very long time.
This guy's definitely got my attention.
So we have legends in ancient times, the Atlantean fire crystals, which were probably electrets, which I'm going to cover about that as well. Unbalanced gravity wheels in the 11th century. That's also something that has been around for a very long time. And it's also being resurrected now. There are gravity wheels that have been...
Sorry, I had to pause it there just for 1 second, because what he's talking about, something I've done a few episodes on and we need to do more on. There's like the Basraka wheel, I think it's called, or Bas something or other, as well as Leonardo da Vinci's several of his drawing depictions of these spheres within spheres and stuff are actually designs of these overbalanced wheels that people have recreated and seem to actually be these functioning perpetual motion designs.
I've seen them from the totally opposite approach of requires energy input directly converted into linear thrust. And in that sense, yeah, from what I've seen, I seriously was skeptical about it and still am for every single new design that I see that I haven't thoroughly analyzed. But the main point is I've analyzed enough designs at this time where I have seen ones which actually work, which generate a linear force directly from within their own mechanical motion by taking advantage of relativistic acceleration and deceleration and the differential in tangential mass pulling against it basically when it's moving fast and pushing it back into position when it's moving slowly. That whole basic concept, that out of balance system where you have a motion that changes velocity very, very quickly at one part of its cycle and is pulled against exactly that point, is the key for all of those types of future inertia propulsion tech. Basically, that's what on Star Trek, when they're doing their impulse thruster stuff, that's how the impulse thrusters work. They're not actually blowing out propellant. The impulse thrusters are effectively converting kinetic energy along the tangential axes to a direct force on the ship. And we can really build that kind of tech with today's technology, just recycled industrial commercial technology. If we
and figure it out and applying metamaterials.
Oh, yeah, exactly. The metamaterials are the best way, in my opinion, to do it, because there you have a solid state thing that's already made in the form of a solid material, and you can apply it to any number of different applications. So it's a unique, it's a like self-contained force generator basically, and it screws with space-time. So why wouldn't you want it?
Welcome, welcome. We finally have Simon C. We're only 5 hours in, but I knew you'd finally join, my fellow Canadian brother.
Hey, how's everybody doing?
Started in operation, and evidently that's also a real technology. Cold fusion in the Middle Ages. This is something that has been called alchemy, and alchemy and cold fusion are kind of related to one another. It's a gray area that blends into each other. Phonon resonance. This is using sound or longitudinal waves, which are basically the sound equivalent of light or of an electromagnetic wave to produce changes at the nuclear level. When yes, that is also possible. So, Joe Champion rediscovers phonon resonance in the 20th century, although this had been done in ages past. There's something that was called the lost chord in alchemy. And the lost chord essentially is, it's a blend of sound frequencies that can actually cause nuclear changes to occur. And this is something, for example, there are stories of the alchemist actually putting a violin next to the crucible and just drawing a chord while it's at the correct temperature. And the crucible would essentially be something that would be a red mercury or something similar to that. And a lot of alchemists had some health problems as a result of that. So also, physics tells us that matter is frozen energy. And Marco mentioned something about that as well. Matter is a mix of standing wave patterns. So it's almost as if there's very little difference between the light that's here and the matter that's here. The only difference is that it's not moving. And it's essentially a standing wave. So let's go a little forward. Okay, Bessler wheel in the 18th century. The gravity wheel was rediscovered. John Keeley in the 19th century. John Keeley was a man that produced, again, using phonon resonance, nuclear changes. He also had some devices that would produce anomalous amounts of energy. Nikola Tesla, in the 19th and 20th century, the most famous of the electrical engineers in recent history, actually started out as a mechanical engineer. He actually invented a lot of mechanical things, and he transitioned over into electrical engineering. So there are a lot of mechanical analogs in early electrical engineering. For example, the mechanical ether, that sort of thing. There are energy patents in the 19th century that were very interesting in the effect that it had many free energy aspects to it. And then there's Clerk Maxwell. James Clerk Maxwell, this is an interesting story, that he had a working unified field theory back in the 19th century. And this essentially combined the electric, magnetic, and gravitational fields at that time. Now, back then, there wasn't much of a talk of anything as far as a strong or weak nuclear force. The strong nuclear force is most likely a short-range gravity field. And now we get into the cover-up part, because there is a political angle to all of this. Nikola Tesla had a interesting run-in with J.P. Morgan. There's a story about the Nikola Tesla and the carbon button lamps, and Dan had mentioned something about George Egley earlier with the carbon fusion. It all started with Nikola Tesla. So he basically had this carbon button lamp with a high voltage on it, and he noticed that there were what he called actinic rays coming from it, which were X-rays. He also noticed that there was excess energy coming from the carbon button lamp. So he also noted that there was an odd spectrum coming from it, as if there were other elements that were being converted to and from, most notably a boron line, so that there was carbon converting the boron back to carbon again, doing this ping pong back and forth. So when he realized that was going on, he was trying to promote this as a free energy system. Yeah, it's back. Yeah. Anyway, then there was the story of the Nikola Tesla and the Pierce Arrow. Nikola Tesla had a car, which was called a Pierce Arrow, with carbon rods in there. No one could understand what the carbon rods were for. It turns out that earlier to doing the Pierce Arrow, Nikola Tesla and Nikola Tesla was a very utilitarian person. He would only invent things he had an immediate use for. So he invented an open-air X-ray tube. The X-rays were tuned to the nuclei of the carbon. No one really picked up on that one. So he realized that if he induced a K-shell collapse in the carbon, that the carbon would transition into boron. Didn't take much energy to do that, maybe 1,000 electron volts or so. 1,000 electron volts to turn carbon into boron. Boron turns back into carbon, and what comes out is over 10 million electron volts of energy. So you have massive amounts of energy from a reversible nuclear reaction. There was a talk that actually an argument that Nikola Tesla had with J.P. Morgan. J.P. Morgan said, well, why can't you be like this Einstein fellow? He learned how to split the atom. At that point, Tesla was extremely aggravated, disturbed, and he said that there is no point in destroying natural elements, that we can obtain all the energy we need from reversible nuclear reactions. He was right. That's another way of doing it. So there are people right now, George Egley being one of them, and several others that are working with carbon with this to see if the carbon collapse will produce excess energy. And historically it does. So there's a great deal of hope on that. Now, after Nikola Tesla does this demo with the Pierce Arrow, then obviously JP Morgan was very disturbed over this idea that Tesla could produce free energy. I mean, he was thinking of doing this thing in a very big way with Wardenclyffe. So he had two different methods that Tesla knew that he could do, and he knew that these two methods were very disastrous to the economy, and these were people that were plugged into the economy in a very big way. They were making profit. And one of the things that Morgan said is, if this fellow Tesla gets his way, all we'll be able to do is sell antennas, and then they'll be able to milk this cow for free. So he intended to turn off the milk supply. So Oliver Heaviside comes along, who was evidently contracted by some financial interests to bury the original theory on the joining or the unified field theory. So what happened was that in many of the universities, this original theory was being taught, and many people were realizing that free energy was possible, that you could tap the vacuum. There's incredible amounts of energy. Yes, there's 10 to the 93rd ergs per cubic centimeter. And if we tap just a fraction of that, to give you an idea how much energy is in there, just a fraction of that energy is enough to boil off all the oceans on Earth. So it's something that you have to be very careful with to tap into. But it's possible to do this. So after Oliver Heaviside basically buries Maxwell, he lobotomized the original theory, where he took the gravitational side, just sawed it off, threw it away, nobody would need it. Well, it turns out that the gravitational side is where you get the free energy. So without the unification, then we couldn't combine the two sides of the equation and get free energy. So after that, then Henry Moray comes along, and Henry Moray realizes that there was a working theory, and he builds a free energy converter. This produced 50,000 watts. It was about that big. And the thing was running cold, which meant that this was producing energy that was not conventional. It wasn't nuclear, it wasn't anything else other than tapping the local vacuum. But Nikola Tesla also mentioned that the secret to doing this was in resonance, where you don't extract the energy, you have it in resonance, where it's pulling out and then snapping back again. So it's called reactive power, and reactive power can power real world devices. So Henry Moray's device was also buried for the most part, but there are people who are recreating this one as well and have a working theory. And so there is a groundswell on free energy. And what we're understanding is that there's a certain protocol that you have to use with this for safety. And we're also realizing that whenever you tap vacuum energy, and you can tap this using nuclear fission, by the way, but it's in a bad way, because with nuclear fission, this can actually extract, it causes a local loss of binding energy. So, and this has been documented, with nuclear fission, what you wind up with is
I've talked about this before,
a local sink for binding energy. So this means that matter basically has a case of dry rot. It begins falling apart. We found this in anomalous embrittlement inside of nuclear reactors. So that not only is the concrete and the steel going brittle, but people are too. If there's, for example, people are developing embrittlement in collagen and in their bones, osteoporosis. And when they leave the nuclear plant for 2 weeks, suddenly those symptoms begin going away. So we know that fission is not the way to go, because it's changing the basic structure of the vacuum around it. Fusion is the way to go, because it's producing an excess of binding energy. So U.S. National Security Act of 1947 comes along. And what this does essentially is it puts a further clamp on most of the free energy patents. And after this, they route, and this is in the United States, but they reroute all the patents to go through the DoD. What this means is that 7,000 patents since 1947 have been, and this is primarily on free energy and propulsion technologies, have been sequestered. So also governments are discovered to be corporations, and many of the governments of this planet, and the conflict of interest runs rampant. This is also part of the political aspect. It's all one. You have to approach this holistically. Unless you approach it holistically, you won't find an answer. So that's one of the things that I'm attempting to do. 21st century, the classified inventions are rediscovered. Interesting thing about many of these gag orders is they have a time lock on them. They have a time limit. So many of these gag orders are now, they're expired. So what this means is that people can actually go into the libraries and find these, and they're there. I mean, anyone can do this. And as far as the inventor goes, you might kill the inventor, but not the idea. And this gets into Rupert Sheldrake's morphic resonance. The original inventors produced this pattern, this idea, and it's in the ethers. People are rediscovering this. So no matter how much they try to suppress it, how much they try to classify it, their security leaks are basically security leaks that are happening in the vacuum, where people are realizing that these patterns are already there and they're picking up on them. It's amazing how many inventors are rediscovering the same thing all over the planet. For example, I went to a Tesla conference, and there were 5 inventors that discovered the same thing. And if you match the time zones, then they discovered they had the same idea within 5 minutes of one another. So it's useless to try to suppress this anymore. And I think some people in the upper echelons are beginning to realize this. And in the United States, Homeland Security Act is really an act to harass inventors. And I know that there's equivalent acts in Europe as well. However, they're not pursued as aggressively as in the United States. There is an exodus of inventors of friendly countries over here. So, and there are many that have plans for working devices, and they want to share them. So, was Ayn Rand right? Do we need a Galt's Gulch? By Galt's Gulch, I mean that there is a friendly place, a safe harbor for these inventors to go to develop these. And I think the answer is yes. I mean, if we have a safe place for these inventors to produce what they believe they need to do, which is to share the fruits of their creativity with humanity, then I think that we can actually be living in the 21st century as opposed to possibly the 19th, which is where we really are right now. The technology that we have has been held back that far. I remember there was a friend of mine that asked me, where's my hoverboard? You know, from Back to the Future 3. So that's true. We should have that right now. Anti-gravity technology has been suppressed since the late 1950s. But there again, all the records are there and anyone can look and find them. And then some of these free energy inventors are beginning to be called terrorists. But in the way they are, I mean, they do threaten the economy of the planet. but then the economy of the planet is badly upset already. So I don't think it is that much of a problem. Now let's get into the technology. This is a trout turbine. It's originally invented by a man by the name of Victor Schauberger. And the trout turbine is a way of producing torque through an implosive, basically an implosive flow of hydraulic fluid. Now you can also have a liquid metal in there and it'll work even better. How much energy? As much as you want. It depends on how much flow you have in there. Also note that on the outside, if you have an input on the outside of this thing, you'll notice that as it moves through these loops, it produces a reverse vortex on the inside. And that's another important point. How this works is a combination of the two reversed vortexes and the fluid flow through the loops. You can see it produces a non-compensated torque, a non-compensated force, and that produces the torque. When Victor Schauberger originally produced his device, it produced so much power that it twisted off the steel shaft. So this produces a great deal of energy. Richard Clem hydraulic engine. Now another thing is I'm going to show you many of the common points with this. For example, this can actually be stretched out, and it has been, into a spiral cone. And the cone actually looks a lot, and if you imagine that the buckets are actually the seeds of a pine cone, then in 3 dimensions, that's how it would look. Now, let's look at the next one. The Richard Clem hydraulic engine, again, please take note that it has a spiral geometry, it has an implosive aspect to it. This one is it does have a large COP. The story behind the Richard Clem motor is that he produced an engine that had 325 horsepower. It had so much power that it destroyed the clutch. So again, this was just using cooking oil instead of regular motor oil, because the hydraulic oil, the motor oil wouldn't actually hold up under the immense strain. And there were shear effects, there were pressure effects, and he had to use actually cooking oil for this one. So you'll see a lot of commonalities with Dan's imploder in this one as well. For example, please note the rim jets on the lower. This one is also a part of it. And this thing produced, like I said, a great deal of energy. We're going to be doing a math model on this one. This one did work. It was back in the 70s, and we have some interest that will want to replicate this. Excuse me. Anyway, so solar effect generator. Now this one produces power through unbalanced magnetic fields. What kind of magnetic fields? Fields that move in a vortex arrangement. This one also produced extremely high values of torque. In fact, you can see that on the upper diagram over here, we have, that's the North Pole, that's the South Pole over here. You can see that the way this thing is arranged, there is no way for this thing to have a permanent balance to the magnetic field. So that's how it works. Control on all of these is very problematic. It's a very sore point with many of the inventors. They have had devices explode, destroy themselves. Victor Schauberger has, Cyril has, Clem did. So the challenge for this is to produce a system which is controllable. This one is a Carl Schaefer steam generator. Also note the commonality. You have another inverse cone. You have fluid flowing to the interior, producing an implosive effect. And on the other hand, this one does not produce, it produces a small amount of torque. But this produces steam. And it produces anywhere from 165 to 325 degrees of steam. The first test that it made was 165 degrees C. And if you look this up on one of the steam cables, that means that it will produce steam at about 4 bar, which is enough to run a turbine. And if you can run a turbine, this means that you can run an alternator attached to that turbine and power your home, power your business, or in a larger version, power an entire community or city. And again, this is power from implosive cavitation. It's a combination of implosion with cavitation and mechanical resonance, because now what you're looking for is a mechanical resonance with the liquid. And when you do that, you can extract energy from the vacuum using that method. Then Dan mentioned something about George Egley earlier. And George Egley's carbon fusion system initially had a COP of 2.0. Other elements were found. There is evidence that this is transmutation in greentechinfo.eu. I think it's .eu. Yeah, okay, .eu. He shows that there is a chart, and this chart basically shows all the elements that are being produced from the carbon. Egley says that he's run this for about 6 weeks, and it's been producing excess energy. As the elements cook into heavier and heavier elements, it's kind of interesting because when you go from hydrogen to helium, there's a little bit of mass energy left over. By a little bit, I mean you're looking at 25 to 50 megawatts per gram. It's less than matter-antimatter fusion, but it's quite a bit. That fraction that's left over, and we're talking about, because the immense energies that we're dealing with, only parts per million of mass to energy being generated, which is a good thing because it would generate a bigger meltdown than it already does. But with that amount, you can power real world things without producing pollution. Because if you're going from carbon to the heavier elements, I have done the spreadsheet analysis on this, and it will not go to fissionable elements, so we don't have to worry about that. I know that we have an enormous problem with burying fission waste or trying to do something with the nuclear waste that we have now. This will not have that problem. On the other hand, what you do wind up with are precious elements. You'll wind up with rare earth elements that have a great financial value to them. You'll also wind up with, and Egley did mention this, it does go through gold, it does go through the platinum series. If you stop the reactions when they go there, then you can pull the material out of the reactor and then refine it. So the nuclear waste from a fusion system as opposed to a fission system has a huge financial value to it. And it's clean energy. It has a reversible K-shell collapse. Again, what I mentioned with Nikola Tesla, this is taking place here too. And next, let's go to the Rossi ECAT nickel fusion system. Another clean system, relatively clean. This one has a COP of 6.0. It goes from nickel to copper, which is just one jump in the periodic table. That one jump produces over 25 megawatts per gram of fuel. If you take a look at the entire sequence, which goes on for 19 pages for the Egley system, this thing produces so much energy that it actually exceeds the mass energy of the carbon that was put into it to begin with. And the Rossi system produces, again, clean energy as long as nickel 59 is avoided. There is a way of doing that. Nickel 58 has a reaction chain, which is complicated, but any kind of transmutation has problems. You just have to account for all of them. The Defcalian Hyperion reactor, this one has a COP of 20. It also does nickel to copper. Also 25 megawatts or more per gram of fuel. Now to give you an idea, whenever you burn petroleum, petrol, gasoline in your vehicle, there's a few parts per million of energy, mass to energy being generated. And I mean, you're just burning just tremendous amounts of this. But when you convert one element into another, going up the periodic table, it produces so much energy that you're just generating energy with picograms of fuel at a time. I mean, you're not dealing with kilograms. That's why you can have a cartridge with just a few grams of fuel in it, it'll last 6 months. Same thing with the EGLI system, and same with many of the fusion systems. And of course, this is Rossi's competitor. If nickel 58 is used, there are reaction byproducts which will include nickel 59, which has a half-life of 76,000 years. So that's something to keep track of. Okay, so here's another device. We're going out of fusion now. This is Tom Bearden's energy collector. And Tom Bearden was interested in tapping the vacuum without producing effects that would have a negative effect on the vacuum. So this was originally put out, I believe, in the 1990s. No one had the foggiest idea how to do this. We knew that the collector was some kind of capacitor. We knew that it needed a switching system or some kind of a resonant frequency going into it. But up to this point, nobody really knew what to do with it until now. This is how to implement Bearden's energy collector. So it's an electret. Essentially what you do is you have two back-to-back electrets. What this does is it's in resonance with the vacuum without actually extracting anything. It basically produces a vacuum polarization that produces the energy coming out of it. Theoretically, this will work. And bench testing is yet to be done, but we believe that this is the best route to go. Then there's the Charles Flynn transformer using magnetics to do the same thing. There are several different magnetic devices. If you go to Patrick J. Kelly's site, there is a book with over 1,000 pages with all the free energy systems in there. He has documented over 100 pages for magnetics alone. There's over 200 patents that are known to work that are based on magnetics. So the trick with this is to do it without discharging the magnets, because if you do this and discharge the magnets, then you have to remagnetize and it becomes a conservative system. If you allow the energy flow to run unimpeded and you just divert the energy flow from one side to the other, then you're going to wind up with a condition where the magnets never discharge. And in this case, then you will be able to extract energy from the vacuum through those magnets, because the magnets are basically using spin polarizations that are biasing, or rather cohering the local vacuum. This is another device. It's the implosion transformer. It unfortunately imploded. So the problem is that, it happens, So you have a capacitive tape-on core. It produces an implosion around the secondary that actually it moves faster than the speed of light. And this is what produces the effect. Also produces such a tremendous mechanical stress around the internal core that it actually collapses into powder. So that's going to have to be re-engineered. The theory is valid again. It's a control issue. There's the Floyd Suite vacuum triode amplifier. Sparky Suite, or Floyd Suite, produced a device that was using barium ferrite speaker magnets, and this thing had a tremendous energy output. I mean, it had a COP of over 1,000. So you'd put a small amount of energy in, and this thing would be producing an immense amount of energy out. And yes, it did produce energy out of vacuum resonance. That is, you're putting energy in, but you're extracting it, then you're putting energy in, so the net amount remains the same. You're not tinkering with the local binding energy. So, and having the binding energy go up is okay, unless you have 1 million of these in operation. For example, if you had a planet full of fusion devices in operation, then the local binding energies would start rising significantly. So what we want to do is actually not produce an effect on the vacuum. We don't want to produce an environmental impact, which is positive or negative. We want to just keep it where it is. And that's what the Floyd Suite device did. And that's what the Electret does as well. So, the Robert Alexander patent. This one was banned in the USA. Interesting story behind this one is that the legend of this one is that it was used on board the USS Eldridge, which was in the Philadelphia experiment. Not really something you can verify at this point. However, it's a rotating transformer. What it does is it takes the back EMF and feeds it back into the front end. So it produces a forward torque on the motor generator side. This forward torque acts like a motor. So you initially start it up, and once it's started, as long as there's a load on it, it will continue to operate. Once again, control issue problem. If you short it out, it will overspeed and explode. So it has some problems with that. But that's a fairly easy engineering problem to handle. Now we're going to be getting into the anti-gravity side. That's more fun. This is something that was wound on the bench. Also note that this thing has a configuration like a Celtic knot, where it goes like that. So many of the symbols that we have in ancient times of power are actually symbols of power. They're either symbols of ancient technology that produces energy or produces propulsion. It just so happens that the Celtic knot, if you wind a hydraulic line around it, will produce a lifting effect. So how much? This one will produce on the bench between 5 and 20% lift. So this is another real technology. What do you do with this one? Well, it turns out that the rest of this Celtic knot, it was all parasitic stuff that you want to get rid of. Victor Schauberger told us that the reason that salmon could swim upstream was because of the vascular system inside of the salmon. You look at the loops behind the rib bones, and you can see that as the fish is moving back and forth, it's pumping that blood, that fluid through it very, very rapidly. If you do a spreadsheet analysis on this one, you'll see why the salmon can actually go upstream, why they can hover in midair. You'll also see that this is the same type of vascular signature that's in bumblebees and some insects. And Viktor Grebennikov found this as well, and actually did quite a bit of work on that. He had a lifting platform that worked. This is something that would require a Tesla pump to power it. And we have people that are interested in doing that as well. What do you do with this technology? It needs an application. So, with apologies to Star Trek, this is exactly what you can do with it. It produces a lifting force that, again, many of these anti-gravity systems produce a kind of a blue glow. that was one thing I didn't mention about the Schaefer device. It actually produced steam that had a blue glow to it. Any kind of free energy anti-gravity device, instead of producing a greenish or a reddish color to it, it has a bluish glow to it. So that's another interesting point. Now, this is another thing. It's similar to this. Imagine that you had fluid moving in a vortex, in an involute vortex, in a smoke ring, like that. What does it do? Well, there's a few things that are going on with this. For example, you have several gyros that are around the torus, like that. This gyroscopic moment produces a propulsion effect in itself. If you torque those vortexes, then it produces an unbalanced force, which either will act upward or downward, depending on which way you point the vortex and which way the fluid is flowing. We have an associate that has done the math work on this, and he shows that a 1.6 meter diameter torus with a 4 liter per second flow rate will produce 15 tons of lift. That one has yet to be built as well. Very encouraging, though. His math has been verified. Okay, let's go to the Koski-Frost experiment of 1927, since that one is really interesting. Back in 1927, there were two scientists, Koski, and obviously Koski and Frost, that did a crystal anti-gravity experiment. What they did was they took a quartz crystal and they piezoelectrically overloaded it. They treated the crystal by broadcasting energy into it. And first the crystal went from clear to translucent, and it grew, it expanded on all 4 axes. After this, then they took the crystal, and by this time it had the same consistency as styrofoam. It had lowered its density significantly. They placed the crystal into a holder and realized then that's in that part over here. That's a real photograph. So, interesting story about that one is that the photograph was supposedly a hoax. However, it turns out that Science and Invention was acquired through a hostile takeover, and they wanted to print a retraction. The original owners of Science and Invention wouldn't do that. So they printed the retraction, said the entire story was a hoax, but it turned out that the hoax story was the actual hoax. The reason being that the original story of this one, which was published in Radio Umschau in Germany, has been verified. So this one is the real deal. And Jerry Gallimore said so before he passed away. So how much does it produce? Up to 800 times the weight of the crystal. This means that a 1 kilogram crystal can lift 800 kilograms. The other thing that it produces is some kind of field effect, because we know that when the crystal experiment was redone for charging it, that the man who was doing the experiment, who we were calling Mr. X, found that it produced a 2 meter diameter field around it, that when you went through the field, the hair in the back of your hand would stand straight up. So there was some kind of electrostatic effect. And evidently the experimental rig weighed less when the system was energized. So this is producing a field effect as well as a lifting effect. Can this possibly neutralize inertia? It could. It could very well do that. And that remains for the next experiment. But this is something which is engineerable. This is the original Radio Umschau article. April 1927. And you can see that they did this in a lab, and let's see, this was in Telefunken. This was actually in Derrydene, Poland. So we did it with technology in 1927. We should be able to do this again now. If we can't, there's something really wrong. So, what happened to the crystal? What happened is that it was shattered internally and recrystallized in a high energy form. Its quantum state was changed. Its energy state is what we call dielectric constant, which means that its ability to store electrical energy went way, way, way up. A typical quartz crystal has a rating of 1 to 10. This one was close to 1 to 10 million. So it's extremely high. Okay, what are the inventors offering to the world? Unlimited free energy, anti-gravity, personal freedom from corporate control, freedom to create their own future, or our own future, time for growth in education, because when you're not working as much as you have to pay for expensive fuel costs, expensive electricity costs, expensive transportation costs, now you have much more time to work on yourself. And that means that you can read a book, you can pursue a hobby, you can climb a mountain, do whatever you want to do instead of being yoked to this financial treadmill that we have now. That's what free energy and anti-gravity will promise. So it is also a legacy for our children to be proud of, because if we take this step, this means that we'll be passing it to them, and they'll be thanking us for it. If we pass this up, and we're talking about 3 generations that have gone by since Nikola Tesla. If we pass it up this time, then I think that the civilization has some serious problems to deal with. But if we take the challenge up, we're looking at a civilization that has a chance to go to the stars. And what do the corporate governments offer? Economic slavery, totalitarianism, George Orwell's 1984, a bleak future on a dead world, ultimately extinction. But that's the downside. How do we find the corporate government's agenda? Research all references to treaties, secret or covert. Remember, we have to, this is a chess game. We actually have to be at least 2 moves in front of the people who want to neutralize this energy and this technology. We have to follow the money, because we know that there will be people who are financed to destroy any kind of alternative energy, including the conventional forms of solar, wind, geothermal.